Chapter 264. I think Junior Martial Uncle looks good in this white robe. He looks especially spirited. At first glance, he looks like Prince Charming. Our eternal Prince Charming, Ludowa, also said that if a man wants to be handsome, he must wear white. Fang Yingying said, holding a robe in his hand. I think it's better to wear black. Black makes Junior Martial Uncle look capable, serious, and cold. If Junior Martial Uncle can't beat the old monster of the Chiba army, wearing this will make it easier for him to slip away. Think about it, the whole mountain is dark. If Junior Martial Uncle wears this and hides in the woods behind the rocks, where can he find the Chiba army? Fang Yingying reached out to slap Fang Haohen's head, but he didn't expect Fang Haohen to be on guard against this move. As soon as Fang Yingying's palm reached out, it was slapped by Fang Haohen. Fang Yingying was furious. Although the back of his hand hurt, he pointed at Fang Haohen and scolded, Fang Haohen, you idiot! How can you boost their morale and diminish Junior Martial Uncle's prestige? Now that the war is coming, what do you mean by saying that Junior Martial Uncle can't beat the Chiba army? I didn't say that Junior Martial Uncle can't beat the Chiba army, Fang Haohen explained. I mean, if Junior Martial Uncle can't beat the Chiba army, yes, that's what you said. You don't trust Junior Martial Uncle. There is no if. Junior Martial Uncle can definitely beat the Chiba army, Fang Yingying shouted angrily. If Junior Martial Uncle can't beat the Chiba army, we have to go back to Yanjing. Others will look down on us and laugh at us. If Miss Yi gets angry, she might beat us up every day. You wish, Fang Haohen said. Do you think anyone can make Miss Yi make a move? Fang Yingying was hit on the head. Fang Haohen wanted to turn around and run, but he was still slapped on the head. Fang Yen had just finished bathing. He walked out in a white shirt and said, Aren't you too annoying? I soaked in the bathtub and wanted to be quiet for a while, but I heard you two idiots buzzing nonstop like two flies. My ears couldn't be quiet. Fang Yingying's head was burning with pain, but he looked at Fang Yen with a fawning expression and said, Junior Martial Uncle, we are choosing your battle robe for tonight. I think with your temperament, white suits you the best. Shimen Chue Shui wears white. A man, a sword, a white robe, standing on the roof of the palace. Uncultured. That's the Forbidden City, Fang Haohen said with disdain. That's also the roof, Fang Yingying said. Junior Martial Uncle likes Shimen Chue Shui the most, so I think you should wear a white robe. Who said I like Shimen Chue Shui the most? I like Chu Liuxiang the most, Fang Yen said with annoyance. But Fang Yingying couldn't understand Junior Martial Uncle's hobbies. The name Shimen Chue Shui was so cool that it made people shiver. Other people relied on their looks to pick up girls, but you just needed to hand over your name card and the girl would go back with you. Chu Liuxiang has a lot of wives, Fang Yen said. Which one do you think looks better on me? What? Black. Fang Yingying and Fang Haohen's opinions were still very different. One was black and the other was white. I look good in any one, Fang Yen said. He took the white robe from Fang Yingying's hands and put it on himself. Then he took the black robe from Fang Haohen's hands and draped it over his body. The white robe was the inside, and the black robe was the outside. He wore the feelings of the two people on him. Seeing Fang Yingying and Fang Haohen's serious expressions and sad eyes, he knew they were touched by his actions. Fang Yen patted Fang Yingying's shoulder and Fang Haohen's head. He smiled and said, It's okay. The weather is cold. Wear more clothes to keep warm. If Chen Yebing froze to death on the peak of One Sword Peak, wouldn't I have gotten a great bargain? Fang Yingying's face was full of regret. He said, I should have prepared a set of armor for Junior Martial Uncle. Yes. It's good to buy a Transformer suit to wear. Fang Yen gritted his teeth and looked at the two bastards. He wanted to squeeze them into a meatball. Did they think he was afraid of death by wearing an extra piece of clothing? Fang Yingying stood at the school gate and waved for a long time before a taxi slowly stopped beside them. Where did... The taxi driver looked at the three strange-looking guys in front of him and asked. Of course, he didn't open the door easily. One Sword Peak, Fang Yingying said expressionlessly. It's too far. I'm not going. Before he finished his sentence, the car had already disappeared. Junior Martial Uncle, Those taxi drivers think we're kidnappers. Fang Yingying said angrily. This was already the sixth taxi they had stopped. Every taxi driver saw the expressions of the three of them, heard about their destination, and drove away. Isn't it just going to One Sword Peak? Why are you so nervous? We really aren't kidnappers. Are there kidnappers who are dressed so formally? Fang Yen felt extremely sad. He was going to win glory for his country. He was an iron-blooded man who was going to fight to the death with the Japanese sword god. Why couldn't he even hail a taxi? Is this how you treat your national heroes? Fang Yen suddenly felt that he would never love again. He wanted to turn around and go back to sleep. Use a taxi hailing app, Fang Haohan said. I set the tip to be 50 yuan. Thankfully, with this 50 yuan tip, a taxi finally took the initiative to stop beside them. To One Sword Peak? The black-faced taxi driver asked. Fang Yen, Fang Yingying, and Fang Haohan were about to think of a reason to go to One Sword Peak in the middle of the night when the taxi driver asked the second question. To watch the martial arts competition? You already know? Fang Yen looked at the taxi driver in shock. Hey, I've sent 2 groups of people there, the taxi driver said proudly. Otherwise, who would be willing to go to such a dark place? Many people went there? Many. I heard that the Guanyin platform at the foot of One Sword Peak is almost full. Ordinary people won't be able to watch this kind of competition between peerless masters, right? Fang Yen said. He thought that it was a big loss not to sell the tickets in advance. Bah, there are no peerless masters these days. Aren't they just bragging about themselves because they want to be famous? What Tai Chi Grandmaster? What Japanese sword god? It's probably not as good as the martial arts competition I watch every night. Fang Yen touched his face. Fortunately, there was no saliva. Seeing that he still needed to find the way, Fang Yen resisted the urge to kill him. Fang Yingying understood Fang Yan's mood and said in a low voice, Junior Martial Uncle, I can also drive. Shut up, Fang Yen said. The taxi driver drove to the Guanyin platform and refused to leave. He said, It's 160 yuan in total. Plus the 50 yuan you said, it's 210 yuan in total. Brother, do you need a receipt? Fang Yen looked at the dense crowd at the Guanyin platform and said, Master, can we go up? We're only halfway up the mountain. Oh, brother, it's not that I don't want to go, but look at the traffic ahead. I can't go even if I want to. The taxi driver complained. Fang Yingying paid the driver. They got out of the car and walked toward the top of Mount Sword. Melon seeds, peanuts, beer, binoculars. Hey, there are people who come here to do business. These merchants were really all-pervasive. Mount Sword was an undeveloped mountain range. It used to be the base camp of the racing gang. Today, the mountain road was full of cars. The racing gang didn't have a chance to show off. But when they parked their gorgeous sports cars at the Guanyin platform, they received more exclamations and envy than if they won the racing championship 100 times. The higher they went, the more rugged the mountain road became. In the end, there was no way to go. This was also the reason why most people stayed at the Guanyin platform. It was very dangerous to climb the mountain in the middle of the night. If they accidentally rolled down, they might even lose their lives. Of course, such steepness was not an obstacle for Fang Yen, Fang Yingying, and Fang Haohan. They ran as fast as they could to the top of the mountain. Looking at the moon in the sky, their minds wandered. It's so cold, Fang Haohan said. Junior Martial Uncle was really smart. He put on 2 coats in advance. Fang Yingying didn't say anything. He stood at the top of the mountain with his head held high, bathed in the cool wind and moonlight. It seemed that he was about to face a battle of life and death. This feeling of immersion was really wonderful. Which martial artist didn't want to stand at the top of the world? At this moment, a white figure dashed up the mountain at high speed. His figure was like a white ape, a cheetah, and an immortal born in the world. He didn't need to climb with his hands. With a tap of his feet, he jumped several meters up. Those odd-shaped stones and barbed thorns didn't bother him at all. In the blink of an eye, Chiba Hirobumi was already standing in front of Fang Yen. You are very punctual, Chiba Hirobumi said with a smile. This is the traditional virtue of our Hua Xia people, Fang Yen said. Chiba Hirobumi pointed to the crowd on the mountainside and said, "A lot of people came. It's normal for an expert like me to have 300 to 500 fans. They all want to see me defeat you with their own eyes." Chiba Hirobumi chuckled and said, "Someone deliberately released the news. They want you to die. They want you to be defeated in front of countless people. They want you to lose your reputation. It seems that your relationship with people is really bad." A wise man like Chiba Hirobumi could see the whole picture with a glance. When he saw the crowd below, he understood that there was another group of people behind the battle. Moreover, it was a group of people who were not kind to Fang Yen. Of course, Chiba Hirobumi didn't have good intentions when he talked about this topic with Fang Yen before the battle. "I like to defeat you when others want to see me defeated," Fang Yen said with a smile. "We call this behavior face-slapping." Chapter 265. When Fang Yen was very young, there was a question that he could not understand. Why did Shimin Chueshue and Yi Gucheng have to fight on the summit of the Forbidden City? Why did the East Heretic, the West Poison, the South Emperor, and the North Beggar's supernatural powers have to be discussed on Mount Hua? Why did they have to choose such a high place to spar? If it wasn't someone else's roof, then it was on a famous mountain. Plains wouldn't do? Not a lake? The sea won't do? The canyon wouldn't do? Why did he have to choose a high place? Later, when Fang Yan's Taiji heart was first formed, he gradually found the answer to this question. When experts exchanged blows, it was only natural that they would do so on a high ground. If you are not at the top of Mount Hua, how will others know that you are an expert? If you climbed to the top of Mount Everest to fight, then you would be a peerless master. If you went to outer space to fight with people, you would be a transformer. Besides, such a name sounded impressive, didn't it? If Shimin Chueshue and Yi Gucheng went to Zhangjiago to have a sword duel, others would say that it was a duel at Zhangjiago. Would Shimin Chueshue and Yi Gucheng still have the face to go out and meet people in the future? The tallest mountain in Flower City was the Sword Peak, which made Fang Yen feel deeply regretful. The wide-sleeved robe of Chiba revealed half of her fair breasts. His robe was actually empty, and his skin was so white, even whiter than a woman's. This filled Fang Yan's heart with anticipation. If the Qinya soldier froze to death on the top of the mountain, then he would win without a fight. Fang Yan's shirt was white on the inside and black on the outside. His long robe reached the top of his shoes. The circular cloth shoes were the ones he had worn when he ran away. These were the 1,000-layer soles that his mother had stitched for him. Not only was it sturdy and durable, but it also had emotional support. Upon hearing Fang Yan's wish to reverse the situation and slap his face, Chiba of the army didn't smile at him. Instead, he seriously said, "You Huaxia people have an old saying, don't bully the young for being poor. In terms of age, I'm much older than you." Fang Yen sneered and said, "I thought you didn't know. What kind of hero are you to challenge me at such an old age? Why don't you challenge the king of gossip, Kai Zhonghong? Why don't you challenge the martial arts fanatic Ho Zhendong? Why don't you challenge householder Weed?" The people that Fang Yen called out were all people that he didn't like or wanted to defeat. If the Chiba military department had issued a challenge to them in advance, then Fang Yen could have saved a lot of time and energy. In the darkness of One Sword Peak, the roars of several men could be heard. "Yellow-haired brat, you yellow-haired brat. If this Japanese kid can't kill you, I'll definitely tear you into pieces. I'm going to die of anger. I'm really going to die of anger. Don't stop me. Let me fight that be *starred who has no sense of propriety. I'll let him know the power of our 8 trigram school. I'm Blue Cloud, the useless disciple of householder Weed. Fang Yen, if you don't die today, I'll definitely challenge you tomorrow." The most awkward thing happened. You thought that you were talking behind someone's back to attract enemies, but you didn't expect that the person you were attacking and slandering was standing behind you and watching coldly. Of course, after hearing Fang Yan's words, their gazes were no longer cold, and they could no longer watch from the sidelines. All of them shouted and cursed, wanting to rush forward and kill Fang Yen before the Chiba military department did. Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan looked at each other. Fang Yingying's face was pale as he said, "How many people did Junior Marshal Uncle offend with just one sentence? I don't know about the others, but the 8 trigram school's householder Weed and that martial arts fanatic Ho Jindong will definitely fight to the death with our family. Junior Martial Uncle is Junior Martial Uncle. It's amazing how much hatred he can garner. If Junior Martial Uncle wins today, we'll stay away from him tomorrow. Fang Yingying exhorted. If Junior Martial Uncle lost or died, then everything would be over. People in the martial arts world would also pay attention to a person's death. No matter how much they hated Junior Martial Uncle in the past, they would not take revenge on his family after he passed away. However, if Junior Martial Uncle won today, those people would take revenge on him crazily. Junior Martial Uncle was a despicable person with high martial arts skills, so he was naturally not afraid of them. These 2 little followers couldn't bear such a blow of anger. I've already thought about it. If Junior Martial Uncle wins today, we'll buy tickets to go back to Yanjing tomorrow. Fang Haohan nodded and agreed with Fang Yingying's words. He felt that this was the first time his big brother had spoken so reasonably. Fang Yan was very angry. He pointed at the crowd in the darkness and scolded, "Are you done? I'm recommending our Hua Xia's elite martial artists to the Japanese sword god. The reason why I mentioned your names is because I admire you. Why don't I let him challenge Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan? Because it's not necessary." Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan wanted to buy tickets to go back to Yanjing now. "Yellow hair boy, wait to die. Grandpa doesn't need your admiration. If you lose, we'll naturally challenge that old guy. Master's name is not something you can call out." Fang Yan, prepare to die. He was fighting an international enemy to the death, but there was a group of bastards hiding in the darkness and scolding him. Fang Yan felt that these guys were really too embarrassing. He picked up a stone from the ground and threw it toward the place where there were many people in the darkness. The stone flew out, but it didn't make any sound. When Fang Yan was wondering where the stone flew to, the big stone smashed toward Fang Yan at a faster speed. Before Fang Yan had time to fight back, countless stones flew out from the darkness. Fang Yan covered his head and ran away, shouting, "Hero, help me fight back." "Okay, Junior Martial Uncle." Fang Yingying agreed readily, then picked up the stone and threw it at Fang Yan. Such a Junior Martial Uncle didn't matter, he just wanted to smash him to death. After everyone was busy for a while, Fang Yan came out of the corner with a smile and said to Chiba, who was standing still and waving his sleeves to throw the stones away, "Look, our Hua Xia people are so enthusiastic. You have achieved your goal. There are 3 people who are worth fighting," Chiba Hirobumi said as he looked at Fang Yan. He looked very calm. "What are their names?" Fang Yan had purposely attracted the stone formation to create psychological pressure on the Thousand Leaves division. It was just like how Chiba deliberately mentioned to Fang Yan that someone deliberately released the news of their battle to ruin Fang Yan's reputation. This kind of thing made people feel uncomfortable. For super martial artists like them, a storm was like taking a stroll in the park, and they wouldn't bat an eyelid even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them. However, a straw could also crush a camel. Before that straw was put down, one had to keep pressing stones on the camel. Chiba was pressing stones on Fang Yan, and Fang Yan was also pressing stones on Chiba. This was a psychological battle, and the pressure was already formed as they talked. I've already said that they are Grandmaster 8 Trigrams, martial fanatic Ho Jindong, and Weed Hermit's disciple, Qin. I just don't know if Weed Hermit, that old Taoist, is here. He's very good at climbing the cloud ladder. Chiba didn't disappoint Fang Yan. He said decisively, "After I defeat you, I'll visit them one by one." What's more, this one sentence had created 3 opponents for him at once. This was a trap that Fang Yan had dug for him, and it was also an inner demon. He had to take Fang Yan's move. Before setting foot on the magical land of Hua Xia, Chiba already knew that Hua Xia was full of martial artists and talents. So what if 3 top-notch experts appeared with 1 stone? So what if I have to accept their challenge after I defeat you? I entered the Tao with the sword. With a sword in hand, the world is mine. Those who block my sword, I'll cut their bodies and destroy their spirits. Whether it's 1 person or 100 people, they'll all die under my sword. How lonely would it be without human blood to feed the sword? With this thought, Chiba's heroic spirit reached the clouds, and his fighting spirit rose in him. Fang Yan waved his hand. Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan immediately ran faster than rabbits. A great battle was about to break out. They were afraid that they would get involved in it. Chiba raised the middle finger of his right hand. His feet didn't move at all, but he rose into the air out of thin air. The mountain wind whistled, rustling the weeds and leaves on the ground. The strange thing was that Chiba's clothes and long hair were tightly attached to his body, completely unaffected by the wind. This was a shield of qi, which could release qi and cover his whole body. Fang Yan knew that at this moment, Chinya's Department of War could not be touched by wind, rain, or mosquitoes. With this person's profound cultivation, even if an ordinary person hacked at him with a saber or axe, they would not be able to harm him. This was the world of high-level martial artists, which was also the inner Jianghu that ordinary people didn't know. Fang Yan was the opposite of Chiba's. He stretched out his arms, and the black robe covering him was blown away by the mountain wind. The wind was soft and gentle, helping him take off his cumbersome clothes very skillfully. The tip of his right foot touched the ground and began to draw a semicircle in front of him. If you looked carefully, you would find that the tip of Fang Yan's foot didn't actually touch the ground. It didn't even touch the weeds and mud on the ground, but there was a clear semicircle on the ground. Some weeds and leaves were cut, giving off the sweet smell of juice. Fang Yan was dressed in white. Just his good looks alone made people feel that he was extremely handsome and suave. Fang Yan bowed slightly, and his plum blossom steps were natural. His hands also danced with his body consciously. The wind was blowing, and he was blowing with the wind. The tree was shaking, and he was shaking with the tree. He was the wind, and he became the tree. As soon as Tai Chi entered meditation, everything was put down, and he entered a peaceful world. It seemed that under the bright sun, in the universe, in the flowers and plants, he was swaying and flickering. Seeing Fang Yan's state at this time, someone in the dark shadow cheered. Tai Chi is most particular about starting momentum. Starting is part of Tai Chi, and it is also the beginning. Quiet like a 1,000-year-old pine and cypress, 10,000-year-old tortoise, moving like a river dam, wind and thunder rolling, stars falling, planets crashing. This kid actually has the momentum of wind and thunder when he moves. Interesting. Chiba heard the comments of the outside world. In his world, every flower, every grass, every insect, every bird, every sound was captured by him at will. In his absolute wall domain, he was the god that ruled the world. This was somewhat similar to Fang Yan's heart of Tai Chi. All methods returned to the origin. The origin of the world was unique. Anything that was done to the extreme would enter the same domain. Since he had already entered the battle, then he would abandon the noise and use his most powerful killing move to defeat and kill the opponent. This was respect. Chapter 266. When Lu Qingming rushed over, the Guanyin platform was almost crowded to the point that there was no place to stand. He looked up at the top of the mountain, but he couldn't see anything except the lonely cold moon. What are they looking at? Lu Qingming asked with a frown. There were so many people at the scene, but no one spoke. Everyone stretched their necks to look at the top of One Sword Peak. It seemed that an unprecedented battle was taking place there. Even if there were really people competing and fighting, they couldn't see it with their naked eyes. Was there a need to be so serious and devout? Young master, let's go a few steps forward. There's an old gentleman pavilion there. Our people have already inquired about it. That's the best place to watch the martial arts. Captain Ning He, who was behind Lu Qingming, whispered. Lu Qingming nodded and thought that it should be so. If he squeezed with these people, he wouldn't be able to see any good show. He could only look at these black heads and smell the hot, sweaty odor coming from their bodies. The Old Lord Pavilion was a simple and crude pavilion, with 4 stone pillars and an arched dome. There were no tables or chairs, and it was even difficult to shelter from the rain and wind. It was said that when Taishang Laojun climbed the mountain, he rested here, and later generations built a pavilion at the place where Laojun rested. Wasn't Taishang Laojun an immortal? With a wave of his sleeves, he could go beyond the 9 heavens. Why did he have to rest halfway up the mountain after climbing One Sword Peak? When Lu Qingming came over, there were already several black figures in the pavilion. What was even more surprising was that they had prepared their own wooden tables, chairs, fruits, and wine for themselves. Lu Qingming's eyes turned cold. When he was about to ask Ning He who those black shadows were, someone took the initiative to greet him. "Qingming, come here quickly. It's really boring to drink alone. You came at the right time." Jiang Zhulu. This was the voice of Jiang Zhulu, who rarely appeared outside recently. Lu Qingming didn't like to deal with Jiang Zhulu because he felt that the father and son, one was silent and treacherous, and the other was gentle and cunning. Neither of them were good people. Of course, how could there be good people in their circle? Since others had invited him, it would be extremely impolite to refuse. After all, they were all familiar with each other, so it was still polite to drink a glass of wine together. Moreover, if it weren't for the fact that he had been performing quite well recently and had an obvious upward trend in the Lu family, the proud and arrogant Jiang Zhulu wouldn't have taken the initiative to invite him over for a drink. Lu Qingming strode towards the old lord's pavilion. When he got closer, he discovered that Jiang Zhulu was holding a small telescope in his hand and was peering at the top of the mountain. Lu Qingming thought, in this kind of dark night, separated by such a long distance, no wonder when I saw them, I was just a black shadow, but he was able to recognize me at a glance. It turned out that he had the help of binoculars. She also thought that if he kept looking at her with binoculars, then wouldn't he be able to see the changes in her expression when she heard his voice? Feeling a little unhappy, he secretly decided that he would work hard to improve his self-cultivation in the future and strive to be able to keep a straight face no matter what happened. Jiang Zhulu put down the binoculars in his hand and smilingly said, "Come, Qingming. Let us brothers have a drink. This cool breeze is refreshing, the boundless winter moon is boundless, there are friends, good wine, and there's even someone who will put on a life and death show for us. Isn't life happy?" Lu Qingming took the wine cup that Jiang Zhulu brought over and clinked glasses with Jiang Zhulu. Then, the two of them simultaneously tilted their heads and drank the wine in the cup in one gulp. Putting down the wine cup, Lu Qingming sized up the decorations of the old lord's pavilion and asked with a smile, "Big brother Jiang has been here for a long time?" "Of course." Jiang Zhulu didn't hide his thoughts. "Fang Yan is an old friend of mine. He is fighting with his life on the line and is in danger. How can I not be concerned about such a big matter? So, I had them come to Mount One Sword to survey the best viewing area and prepare a table and good wine. Every time Fang Yan wins, I drink. Every time Fang Yan takes a step back, I drink. He fights with his fists, I fight with my wine. Together, we will fight the Japanese sword god." Lu Qingming was very clear about the relationship between Jiang Zhulu and Fang Yan. Lu Qingming wasn't the only one who knew. There weren't many people in the upper circle of Huaqing who didn't know. Originally, Lu Chaoga was the Jiang family's daughter-in-law. Jiang Zhulu took care of Lu Chaoga in every possible way. Even Lu Qingming thought that the two of them would eventually be together. It was impossible for Lu Chaoga to escape the Jiang father and son schemes. Because of Fang Yan's appearance, the situation underwent a shocking reversal. Lu Chaoga and Jiang Zhulio's relationship gradually drifted apart. Instead, she became more and more intimate with Fang Yan. More importantly, Lu Chaoga forced Jiang Zhulu to return their family's shares, but she secretly used the real Rubik's Cube technology to create an innovative energy company. Chaoyan Technology was a newly opened small company that was unknown to the outside world. However, it received the attention of all the energy giants in the country or those who wanted to enter the energy industry. Because everyone knew that if there were no problems with the Rubik's Cube technology, whether it was used for military or civilian use, it would bring unimaginable profits to investors. Lu Chaoga founded Chaoyan Technology, but she sold her Longtu shares to the Lu family at a sky-high price. Now, the Lu and Jiang families were fighting in the Longtu group. The two families were like fire and water, fighting for power and profit endlessly. This was also the reason why Lu Qingming was unwilling to approach Jiang Zhulu when he heard his voice. Now, the relationship between the Lu and Jiang families was too tense. However, hearing Jiang Zhulu describe the relationship between him and Fang Yan in an interesting way, Lu Qingming also put down his hatred and took the initiative to raise his glass to Jiang Zhulu. He laughed and said, "Brother Jiang has sharp eyes. Do you think this glass of wine is a toast to Fang Yan for winning or taking a step back?" Jiang Zhulu raised his binoculars and glanced at the top of the mountain. He raised his glass and said, "My good friend is advancing and retreating. I don't even know if he won or lost. I don't care so much. Us brothers should have a good drink." Then, the two glasses gently collided with each other, and the two once again raised their heads and drank the wine in the glass. Then they raised their glasses and laughed. When the clang rang out, the ice between them melted by a large chunk. Lu Qingming looked at Jiang Zhulu and asked with a serious face, "Brother Jiang, who do you bet on to win this battle?" Yes, what Jiang Zhulu said was right. Fang Yan was advancing and retreating like a butterfly. It was really difficult to predict where he would step next, whether he would take a step forward or a step back. Chiba Bing was in the air, with iron feathers and cold clothes, like a goshawk looking for food. Fang Yan was playing with the flowers. The white robe on his body was like a wave, moving up and down with Fang Yan's body. Fang Yan's body was like a white crane, proud and majestic, yet carefree and at ease. Chiba Bing's middle finger was raised like a sword, and his whole body was like a sharp sword. His back was still straight in the air. His body completely defied the principles of physics. If that powerful ability to stay in the air was imposed on any player, they would be able to jump from one end of the field to the other. Chiba Bing's energy penetrated the outer layer of his body, but it only absorbed clothes and hair and tightly stuck to his body. It did not form a cyclone to absorb the grass and dust on the ground into his body. The energy was balanced, smooth, and free. There was no waste. This energy can be released and withdrawn, and it can be big or small. It has become a part of Chiba Bing's body. The Japanese god of swords lives up to his name. Someone in the dark finally said something good about Chiba Bing. It should be known that before, everyone was not very optimistic about Chiba Bing. Although they felt that Chiba Bing was known as the god of swords, he had already lost the upper hand by challenging a junior. He did this just to make a name for himself. Now that they saw his performance, the experts who had not come into contact with him were all moved. This match could be called a real fight between a dragon and a tiger. Chiba Bing's body jumped in the air for a long time, but he did not make a move. It was not that he did not want to make a move, but that he did not find an opportunity to do so. Fang Yan used the plum blossom steps, which contained the way of yin and yang, and waved his hands left and right, which blocked all the killing moves of Chiba Bing. Those seemingly cumbersome and boring movements made up for every flaw in his footwork. The more he waved, the more flaws in Fang Yan's defense. Yes, there was no flaw in Fang Yan's defense. Chiba Bing was not in a hurry at all. At least his expression was calm and gentle, and there was a faint smile in his eyes. His every smile and every strand of hair told others that he was not in a hurry. After all, he could break through the situation with just a thought. Chiba Bing's body suddenly disappeared on the spot. No, he was still in the same place, but it was just an afterimage. Moreover, in Fang Yan's eyes, countless afterimages appeared on the route that Chiba Bing took. Countless members of the Thousand Leaves military stood in the air, forming a human wall. This scene looked really strange. The real Chiba Bing appeared behind Fang Yan, and his middle finger lightly pointed at the back of Fang Yan's head. His movement was very gentle, and it did not look fast. He was like a benevolent elder pointing his finger at a child's head after he made a mistake and saying, "You naughty boy." After he finished pointing, the child really became a ghost. Finger sword. Chiba Bing used a finger sword to break the enemy's defense. This was Chiba Bing's choice, to use a majestic force to break an invincible defense. Generally, the opponent who used this move was an opponent with a great disparity in strength. For example, Fang Yan could use it on Fang Yingying. However, if Fang Yingying wanted to use it on Fang Yan, only death awaited him. Chiba Bing was very confident in himself. Even if there were millions of people, he would still go forward. Chapter 267. Li Bai once said that the Shu path was as difficult as ascending to heaven. To Chiba Sun, it was extremely difficult to climb the E-Sword Peak. Chiba Sun did not know martial arts, which was unbelievable to the Chiba family. The Chiba family passed down the sword Dao, and they had produced countless sword Dao experts. Regardless of gender, they would more or less learn some martial arts. Chiba Sun was an exception. It was not that Chiba Sun did not like martial arts, but she preferred the tea ceremony. Chiba Sun was worried that her skin would become rough and her muscles would become firm after practicing the sword Dao and martial arts. A tea artisan with rough skin and strong muscles was obviously not presentable. No matter how delicious the tea was, people would lose their appetite when they saw the image of the tea attendant, and the tea tasting effect would be greatly reduced. There were strict requirements for the tea leaves, the water, the heat, and even the pot to boil the water and the pot to make the tea. Not to mention the tea master herself. To become an outstanding tea master, one had to be as beautiful as a lotus flower and as gentle as spring water. The plate, the body, and the temperament were all indispensable. Since Chiba Sun was determined to become the most outstanding tea master in Japan, she had to give up on the pursuit of the sword Dao. It was difficult to become a master if one was half-hearted. At least, that was what Chiba Sun thought in the past. However, when she saw her father personally making a cup of tea, she realized that she was wrong. She was so wrong that she was ridiculously wrong. If her father, Hashirama Chiba, was the best kendo master in Japan, no one would doubt it. However, if her father, Hashimoto Chiba, was said to be the best tea master in Japan, many people would turn their noses up at him. However, that was the truth. Sometimes, the same thought popped up in Chiba Sun's mind. If her father, Chiba Sun, had represented their school, it would have been difficult for Chin Etienne to win in the tea ceremony. Of course, that thought was ridiculous. How could her father represent Warren High School? Even if he won, no one would think that it was something to be proud of, right? Chiba Sun had no objections to Chiba Sun's tea ceremony. He would never ask his children to learn anything. However, since they were not martial artists, they were forbidden from entering the world of martial artists. So, for tonight's match, the Chiba army took Chiba Haomu and his disciple Chin In away, but left her in the custody of her family and forbade her from leaving the house. The person looking after her was an old servant of the family, the wet nurse who watched her grow up. She doted on her in every possible way and never disobeyed. Chiba Kaori couldn't help but giggle. She said that she was going back to her room to study, then tied a rope around her waist and jumped out of the window on the second floor. Now, she was already walking on the mountain path to the top of One Sword Peak. Ah! Chiba Kaori exclaimed. A sharp thorn pricked her finger, and a drop of red blood flowed from between her fingers. Even Chiba Sun was in excruciating pain. "Little girl, are you okay?" A hoarse voice came from behind. This hoarse voice was not unpleasant to hear. On the contrary, it sounded very magnetic. Chiba Kaori was startled. She turned around abruptly and asked, "Who are you?" A woman in black looked at Chiba Kaori in confusion and said, "Aren't you from Huaxia?" "I'm Japanese," Chiba Kaori said in English. "No wonder you have a weird accent." The woman also spoke to Chiba Kaori in English. "Little girl, it's so late. Why are you climbing the mountain by yourself? Don't you know it's dangerous?" "I know," Chiba Kaori said. "But I have to come for a reason." "What reason?" the woman in black asked. "Two men are having a match at the top of the mountain," Chiba Kaori said. "I know that. I'm also here for the competition at the top of the mountain," the woman said. "You're here to watch the match too? But it's too dangerous. You should look up from the observation platform with binoculars. Many people do that. The two fighters are my father, the Chiba army, and my language teacher, Fong Yen. My father doesn't want me to come here. He thinks it's too dangerous. Besides, he's the most gentle father in the world because he never wants me to watch him fight or kill someone. He told me that I'd be sad if he killed someone or someone else killed him. If that's the case, I might as well not watch. Your father is so nice to you. Why did you still come after he said that?" "Because I promised my language teacher, Fong Yen, that I'd watch their match. Our teacher has never broken his promise to me, so I can't break my promise to him." Chiba Kaori smiled sweetly, her eyes filled with sincerity. "You're a good girl who keeps her promise," the woman in black said. "Since we have the same goal, let's go together." "Of course," Chiba Kaori said with a nod. May I know your name? Phoenix, the woman in black said. My name is Phoenix. Phoenix, the king of birds. What a beautiful name. Chiba Kaori smiled happily. So, Miss Phoenix, did you kidnap me? Phoenix was slightly shocked. Then she smiled happily and said, You're very smart. You're smarter than I thought. Yes, from now on you're my kidnap. But don't worry, I won't hurt you. But if my father wants to kill teacher Fang Yen, my safety won't be guaranteed, right? Phoenix nodded with a smile. You'll die. Chiba Kaori's idea was to decide life and death with a sword. It was like an intact egg. You wanted to drink the yolk inside, but there was no hole for you to do so. Therefore, you could only break the eggshell with force. Only by doing so could you drink the delicious egg juice inside. Fang Yan's defense was impeccable, like an intact egg. Chiba Kaori could find a hole to drink the egg juice, so he simply smashed the entire egg with force. His attack was extremely slow and extremely fast. Before his afterimage completely disappeared in the air, he had already stabbed at the back of Fang Yan's head. If it hit, with Chiba Kaori's cultivation, Fang Yan's head would definitely explode. Fang Yan's left foot just happened to walk to the Kuan position. He knew where Chiba Kaori was and what he was going to do, but it was too late for him to turn around. Not only could he not turn around, but his body staggered forward. Bang! This was the cheerful sound when the strength on his finger was released to the extreme. Chiba Shinobu thrust his sword, which stuck close to Fang Yan's back. Fang Yan's clothes seemed to be cut by a sharp blade, and there was a huge cut at once. When Chiba Kaori sent out his sword, Fang Yan's body turned rapidly, then turned 180 degrees and punched at Chiba Kaori, who was following him. Chiba Kaori did not change his move. Once again, he stabbed at Fang Yan's fist with his finger sword. A finger against a clenched fist. Everyone would think that the fist would win. But what if it was a sword against a clenched fist? For Chiba Kaori, the sword was a sword, the branch was a sword, the finger was a sword, the palm was a sword, the body was a sword, everywhere was a sword, and the world was a sword. For others, it was just a finger. But to him, it was an incomparably sharp treasured sword. The distance between the two narrowed in an instant. When Fang Yan's fist was about to be poked a big hole by Chiba Kaori's finger, Fang Yan suddenly stretched out his palm. Yes, he turned his fist into a palm, and his body continued to rush forward. Then his palm cut toward Chiba Kaori's wrist. Chiba Kaori laughed silently. He liked such an opponent, who was young, smart, and not weak. His body sped up 10 times for no reason. Ignoring Fang Yan's hand knife cutting toward his wrist, he used his body to hit Fang Yan's body fiercely. The two rushed in the same direction. Clang! Fang Yan failed to dodge and hit Chiba Kaori's arms hard. Then, his body was sent flying backwards. Crack, crack! Fang Yan's body slid on the ground, crushing countless flowers, plants, and some small stones along the way. Bang! It was not until his body hit a big stone that he stopped with difficulty. The pain in his chest was excruciating. It was as if Chiba's attack had shattered all his internal organs. There was a sour and sweet taste in his throat. He licked his lips, and a warm liquid flowed out. Junior Marshal Uncle. Fang Yingying came out from the corner again and wanted to help Fang Yen. Fang Haohan grabbed Fang Yingying's arm and didn't let him come over at this time. Fang Yen waved his hand, indicating that they didn't have to worry. He wanted to smile at them, but the smile was a little like a grimace. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and struggled to get up from the ground. Only then did blood ooze from Fang Yan's back. It turned out that when Chiba Kaori's finger sword stabbed at the back of Fang Yan's neck, although Fang Yen avoided Chiba Kaori's ultimate skill with drunken crane riding the wind, his clothes and flesh were still cut by his sword chi. Because the fight between the two was too fast, it was only the blink of an eye from the beginning to the present, so the blood had time to appear. Just now, everyone only saw that Chiba Kaori's clothes were torn by him. Chiba Kaori's body slowly landed, and his wide-sleeved robe fluttered in the wind. His whole body was bathed in the moonlight, like a white-clothed god of war. Chiba Kaori looked at Fang Yen, who had just been injured by him, and said, The body can also be used as a sword. Be careful. Thank you. Fang Yan bowed to thank him. This is my first round of failure. Chapter 268. The glass in Jiang Zhuliu's hand fell to the ground, and he shouted excitedly. Fang Yan was sent flying. Lu Qingming wasn't as well prepared as Jiang Zhuliu, and he didn't have binoculars to look through. Seeing Jiang Zhuliu's joyful expression, he thought to himself, didn't you just say that we're good friends? You fought me with fists, and we fought the Japanese sword god together in a drinking battle. Of course, Lu Qingming never believed Jiang Zhuliu's nonsense. Anyone in Huaqing with an IQ of more than 50 wouldn't believe it. Saying the opposite of the truth and saying the bad things nicely was a basic skill that they were trained to learn since they were young. Jiang Zhuliu generously handed the binoculars in his hand to Lu Qingming and said, Qingming, take a look too. It's really exciting. Lu Qingming waved his hand and said with a smile, a gentleman doesn't take what others like. I think Big Brother Jiang needs this binoculars more at this moment. I don't know anything about martial arts, so I'm afraid I can't understand it. Why don't we drink and listen to Big Brother Jiang explain? Jiang Zhuliu put the binoculars on the table and said with a smile, actually, I don't understand either. I'm just watching the show. Jiang Zhuliu took the initiative to raise his glass to Lu Qingming and said, come, Qingming, let's drink to Fang Yan. Fang Yan was sent flying. Lu Qingming said, that's not a good reason to urge us to drink. Let's drink to Fang Yan being sent flying. Lu Qingming laughed and raised his glass to touch Jiang Zhuliu's. He said, this needs to be drunk 3 times in a row. That won't do. If Fang Yan is sent flying once and we drink 3 times in a row, we'll probably be drunk before we even see the result of the match. Qingming, take it slow, there's no rush. Leave half of your brain and one clear eye. I can feel that the real show is yet to come. Big Brother Jiang is right. Lu Qingming nodded. Then let's leave half of our brain and one clear eye and wait for the show to begin. It seems that I already have the answer to my question. Big Brother Jiang bet on the Japanese sword god winning? No, I am betting that Fang Yan will win, Jiang Zhuliu said with absolute certainty. What? Lu Qingming was puzzled. Feeling. I always feel that Fang Yan will win because he has never lost. Since the first time I met him, he has never lost. Countless times, when I thought he would lose, when I thought he would die, he won and came back to life. Tell me, how can people feel at ease and boldly place all their bets on such a person? Didn't we just drink a toast to him being sent flying? Because I want him to lose. I hope he dies. With a gloomy expression, Jiang Zhuliu said with a firm voice, Qingming, us 2 brothers don't need to test each other anymore. You and I have the same goal, and you and my enemy are the same. Ever since the Lu family entered, the Jiang family and the Lu family fought fiercely on the battlefield of Longtu Group. This was purposely done by Lu Chaoga. She set up this whole situation long ago to drag us into the quagmire of Longtu and make it hard for us to get out, while she went into battle with a bold and decisive company recruitment team. We spent all our time and energy on this, so it would be hard for us to take revenge and threaten her. In order to fight for control of Longtu, the Jiang family suffered heavy losses, and the Lu family is a newcomer, so they have to pay 10 times or even 100 times the price to gain a foothold. This war can't continue any longer, it will only drag our Jiang family and Lu family down. Just hindering our development is enough to destroy Longtu Group. Lu Qingming played with the glass in his hand and said, Big Brother Jiang means a truce? What kind of truce? Jiang Zhuliu sighed softly. He had already said it so clearly, but Lu Qingming still wasn't willing to show the corresponding sincerity. Just based on this point, he was far inferior to the Lu tree. If the Lu tree was sitting in front of him, the 2 of them would have already started discussing the conditions of a truce, and he wouldn't be testing the waters again. Qingming, what conditions do you have? Jiang Zhuliu asked with a smile. Say whatever you want. In any case, this is a private discussion between us brothers, it doesn't count. Isn't that right? The discussion between the 2 of them obviously counted. If the conditions were suitable, the Jiang family and the Lu family would reconcile according to the framework of this large agreement. They were the vanguard and the vanguard of the 2 families, This was the meaning of the existence of the family's spokesperson. Lu Qingming's fingers lightly knocked on the table and said, just like what Big Brother Jiang said, the Lu family suffered heavy losses in the Jiang family. If we easily withdraw, I'm afraid it would be a bit too embarrassing. Jiang Zhulu looked at Lu Qingming and said, the Lu family will completely withdraw from Longtu and sell all the shares in their hands to the Jiang family. The Jiang family is willing to give a reasonable price. Don't worry, the Jiang family will definitely not embarrass the Lu family. The more friends, the easier the road. The Jiang family is still very willing to make more friends. Lu Qingming was hesitant. This matter really wasn't up to him to decide alone. He had to go back and report to his uncle, who was also the father of the Lu tree. This was really a complicated relationship between people. Jiang Zhulu knew what Lu Qingming was thinking and advised, Qingming, the uncles are all smart people. They know in their hearts that only if the Lu family completely withdraws from Longtu can we avoid another war. If we only make a verbal truce, the people below will still fight fiercely. This won't benefit either of our families. Lu Qingming raised his cup and said, I will bring back Big Brother Jiang's words. Jiang Zhulu nodded with a smile and said, remember the result of this match? Let's watch the show. The two of them laughed and said. While Fang Yen and the Japanese sword god Chiba were fighting to the death, the two big families, the Jiang family and the Lu family, who were originally fighting to the death, reached a compromise and cooperation in the Single Sword Peak's Old Lord Pavilion. This world was really boring but also new. Drinking and watching the show, the two of you are so elegant. A man's hearty laughter sounded. Jiang Zhulu and Lu Qingming turned at the same time. Jiang Zhulu smiled and said, he's also here, what a pity. Seeing Fang Yen fall to the ground, someone in the darkness sighed. If this kid was 10 years older and had 10 more years of accumulation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill that Japanese kid. He's still too young. What a pity. You old thing, the match isn't over yet. Why are you so anxious? Who said that the current Fang Yen isn't that Japanese's opponent? Didn't he stand up again? You're not convinced? If you're not convinced, let's fight. Let's fight? Chiba Haomu was smiling. He was smiling happily, but there was undisguised cruelty in his eyes. Chiba Haomu pointed at Fang Yen, who had just gotten up from the ground, and said in a vicious voice, Qing Yin, don't you think he looks like a dog? Chiba Haomu had watched the movie Journey to the West, starring Hua Xia, Zhou Xingshi, and there was a line in the movie that left a deep impression on him. He looks like a dog. He felt that Fang Yen looked like a dog, a defeated dog that was about to be slaughtered for meat. This is just the beginning. Qing Yin's voice sounded, but he couldn't see where he was. What? Do you think he still has a chance to turn the tables? Qing Yin, my father is your master. He's the greatest swordsman in the world. No one can defeat him. Not in the past, and not in the future. After a while, Qing Yin's voice sounded again. Master has also been defeated before. Qing Yin. Chiba Haomu was furious. If you can't face yourself and your opponent, you'll never be able to step into the realm of true kendo. Are you lecturing me? I'm reminding you. Chiba Haomu nodded and said, I understand. I'll face myself and I'll respect my opponent, but my father will definitely win, just like he won countless times in the past. I've never doubted that. Chiba Haomu was an expert and a rare opponent. Facing such an enemy would always make one feel powerless, just like when Fang Yen faced the old drunkard. You tried your best to defeat him, but with a wave of his sleeve, you lost miserably. The path of martial arts was like climbing a mountain. Some people lingered at the foot of the mountain, while others were exhausted halfway up. The higher one went, the more difficult it became. It required physical strength, perseverance, and even more, comprehension. Fang Yen had outstanding physical strength, astonishing comprehension, and no lack of perseverance, but he lacked age. He lacked the influence of society, the training of life, and the accumulation of time. He was still so young. That was what everyone said. I don't accept this, Fang Yen roared in his heart. I don't have the influence of society, but I'm young and full of vigor. I lack the tempering of life, but I'm in high spirits. I don't need the accumulation of time, because I'm now full of passion and blood. Being young is my greatest advantage, and it's also my greatest capital. Fang Yan stood in place, stretched out his arms, and slowly closed his eyes. Come on, Fang Yan said. He was waiting for the Chiba Haomu to attack again. He believed that this time, he would not fail. The smile on Chiba Haomu's face gradually faded, and his expression began to become serious. He was growing too fast, almost at a speed visible to the naked eye. If Fang Yan was said to be a little afraid, and a little restrained, at this time, Fang Yan had become a brave warrior who was not afraid of death, a true warrior who fought with his life and passion. He no longer defended passively, and he no longer defended himself impeccably. He only wanted to save his life. He opened his mind and let go of life and death. Based on the experience of the Chiba Haomu, there had never been anyone in the younger generation who could do this before. This boy must not be left alive. Chapter 269. Chiba Minister of War was also a person who cherished talents. His eldest disciple, Qin Yin, was originally a ninja sent by the enemy to assassinate him. After the assassination failed, Chiba Minister of War saw that it was not easy for him to learn martial arts, and that he was indeed outstanding in speed and hiding. He only cut off one of his fingers and told him to take care of himself. Qin Yin was grateful and was willing to take him as his master and serve him for life. The butler he left in Japan to look after the house, the Prairie Lord, was originally an expert from the Japanese royal family. After failing to challenge him, he also abandoned his sword and went into business, helping the Chiba family take care of the increasingly complicated business affairs. He had 9 disciples, and all of them were experts. In Japan, there were countless people who had been guided and influenced by him. The sword god not only used the sword to convey his divinity, but to the Japanese, Chiba Minister of War also represented their spirit. Benevolent spirit, fearless spirit, invincible spirit. At a young age, Chiba Shinobu became known as the god of swords. He defeated the invincible Japanese, and his challengers grew from 1 to 10,000, and from 10,000 to 0. After many years, he finally gained a great reputation, and his life returned to peace. However, there was a man from Huaxia who did the same thing as him. That man swept through the 36 islands of Japan alone and finally fought with him on Mount Hachibi. One was good at defense, and his defense was watertight. The other was good at attacking, and his attacks were fierce and violent. What would the result be when the sharpest spear met the sturdiest shield? After a day and night, the two of them were evenly matched. Chiba Minister of War was unconvinced and wanted to fight again. The man replied, "Childish, childish." These 2 words were like needles nailed into his eyes and stuck in his throat, making him restless and unable to sleep. Why childish? How was it childish? He once again calmed down and comprehended the sword day and night. Finally, his swordsmanship improved greatly once again based on his original technique. He swung out more and more sword shadows, and the sword shadows he swung out became fewer and fewer. After experiencing such a painful process, he no longer had to swing his sword. That was because he was a sword, and everything in the world was a sword. He and the sword had long become one. Chiba Minister of War came to Huaxia, and a simple visit to the school actually caused him to return seriously injured. Chiba of the Ministry of War was shocked. After asking for the details, he found out that he was injured by a teacher of Huaxia. Tai Chi again. The person who swept through the 36 islands of the East Ocean, fought with him for a day and a night, and even called him childish, also used Tai Chi, and that man was called Mo Chingdi. Chiba knew that he had to do something like that. He had to come to that land and conquer that land. Originally, he thought that there would be other East Asian masters who would challenge Huaxia before him, to feel the profoundness of their martial arts, to appreciate the magnificence of their martial arts, and to sacrifice and bleed, but he waited for years and years, and such people did not appear. Chiba Shinobi was extremely sad. Some of Huaxia's people came to sweep across the East Ocean, but why did none of the East Ocean experts have the courage to conquer Huaxia? Later on, he understood that everyone was looking at him because he was the Japanese sword god. The moment Chiba Shinobu saw Fang Yen, he sensed a familiar aura. The same posture, the same arrogance, the same youth, simple and unfathomable, and even the way he smiled was somewhat similar. He was very similar to Emo Qingdi, who called him childish. When he tried to make a move, Fang Yen dodged it easily. This made him confirm again that it was that man, or at least had a close relationship with that man, because when he fought with Emo Qingdi, that man also avoided his first killing move with the same steps. Chiba Shinobu was both emotional and happy. He was emotional because he wanted to challenge Emo Qingdi wholeheartedly, but he didn't know where Emo Qingdi had gone. He was happy that after so many years, Emo Qingdi's descendant had actually grown up. Thinking of this, Chiba Shinobu's mood became a little heavy. So, Chiba Shinobu prepared to start the challenge with Fang Yen, so that he would be the first person to be fed to the sword spirit after he achieved great success in Kendo. Chiba Shinobu knew that Fang Yen was excellent, but he didn't expect him to grow to such an extent in such a short time. This had nothing to do with the improvement of his skills, but had something to do with his inner understanding and willingness to sacrifice. At such a young age, he was able to open his mind and give up life and death. How great would he be in the future? This guy must not be left alive. Chiba Shinobu told himself again. He would become the hero of Huaxia, but he would become the disaster of Japan. He could swear with everything that he had that when this guy felt it was necessary, he would sweep across Japan single-handedly like his predecessor, Emo Qingdi. No, at least Emo Qingdi felt it was necessary. He wanted to fight with the heroes of Japan and test the depth of Japanese martial arts. Based on Fang Yan's usual style of doing things, when he was in a bad mood, when he ate something wrong, when he had diarrhea, when he quarreled with his girlfriend, when he won 5 yuan in the lottery, when the barbecue lady boss gave him an extra plate of edamame, he would also feel that he should go to Japan and sweep the world. At that time, how would Japanese martial arts exist? Where would the dignity of Japanese martial artists be? This guy must not be left alive. This was the third time that Chiba Shinobu told himself. Chiba Shinobu moved. He didn't jump or fly away, nor did he make any fancy or complicated movements. He just walked towards Fang Yen step by step, just like how a normal person would walk. He was like a kind elder, like a kind friend, who just wanted to pat you on the shoulder, touch your head, and tell you that you did a good job. However, if your vision was bright enough or your senses were sharp enough, you would find that wherever Chiba Shinobu went, the plants would wither and the rocks would turn to ash, leaving no chance of survival. Sword incineration. Someone shouted in the dark, "This is sword incineration. Wherever it goes, not even a blade of grass will grow." This old monster actually comprehended the sword incineration? "This kid is in danger," someone said. "This kid is a good seedling. Fang Hui, that old thing, is really lucky to have a grandson like this. No matter what, he's still our kid. We can't just watch him be killed by a little Japanese. I'll help if I have to." You can forget about it. Open your eyes and see that kid's eyes are still closed. Doesn't he know that he's in danger? Doesn't he know how powerful sword incineration is? It seems that he has a way to deal with it. It's said that this kid has learned the heart of Tai Chi very early, so he can be called a god's favored one. They were right. The person who directly suffered the killing intent of Chiba Shinobu was Fang Yen. Sword master destruction, he could feel the fierce killing intent of Chiba Shinobu with every step. It was a kind of cruelty, despair, and unparalleled power. Sword incineration, using the sword to burn oneself, how did he learn this move? Moreover, as the distance between the two got closer, the killing intent became stronger and stronger. When Chiba Shinobu stood in front of Fang Yen, his body was shrouded in a layer of white light. It had a substantial halo that could be seen by the naked eye, which was the effect of the surging energy in the body. Chiba Shinobu was like a huge warehouse, with a terrifying amount of internal energy. Behind him, a khaki-colored path appeared. It was the color of green plants after their water and vitality were extracted. Fang Yen still didn't open his eyes, and his heart of Tai Chi had already been displayed. He didn't open his eyes, but he knew better than anyone what was happening in front of him. He could see the moment Chiba Shinobu walked past, the moment the grass withered, A bug that couldn't escape in time fell limp, and he also saw that even the wind couldn't blow past Chiba Shinobu. You knew he was strong, but you never expected him to be so strong. Fang Yen was very angry, and wanted to kill. These bastards were not simple, and they liked to leave something behind in everything they did. If you had told me earlier that you were so powerful, I would have run back to hug the old drunkard's thigh and kneel down to him, and let him assassinate you or beat you half to death. How could you cheat like this? Because of the turbulence in his heart, Fang Yen almost jumped out of the Tai Chi realm. This shocked him. This was the critical moment of life and death. Once he showed a flaw, Chiba Shinobu would immediately swing his sword and cut him into pieces. You are too excellent. Chiba Shinobu looked at Fang Yen and said, I'm sorry. It would be great if he were an East Asian. If he were an East Asian, he would be ecstatic. He would be willing to teach him everything, and he would become a teacher and a student, a friend, and he would take him to dominate the world, making him the existence he was most proud of. Unfortunately, he was Hua Xia's man. Chiba Shinobu stretched out his hand to Fang Yen. Fang Yen looked at the hand with white skin that was almost translucent. The hand stretched directly toward his chest, gentle and steady. Fang Yen reached out to intercept it. Fang Yan's hand moved like an eagle's claw to grab Chiba Shinobu's wrist. He grabbed it? Fang Yen grabbed the wrist of Chiba Shinobu's hand, and the feeling of physical contact was so full. Fang Yen was pleasantly surprised. How could it be so easy? Was this the old monster of Chiba Shinobu's pretense? He had been tricked. Fang Yan's mind trembled slightly, and there was a dangerous aura in his mind. It was clear that he had grabbed Chiba Shinobu's wrist, but why couldn't he move his hand that was grabbing his arm? Fang Yan's arm couldn't move, but Chiba Shinobu's hand, which was being held, could move at will. His hand dragged Fang Yan's hand and continued to move forward. Then, he made a cut on Fang Yan's chest. The clothes on Fang Yan's chest were torn, and Fang Yan's flesh and blood were exposed. There was a long and deep gash on his chest, and a thin red line appeared. Soon, the red line became thicker and thicker, protruding his flesh and blood. How is this possible? Fang Yan's face was full of horror and disbelief. Chapter 270. Tai Chi represents vitality. Where Chi is, it grows and multiplies endlessly. Sword incineration represents death. There's no return. Fang Yen lost. He lost because the power of death was stronger and more vigorous. What a pity. Someone sighed heavily. The competition ends here. Friends, I'll be leaving first. But let's make it clear. I'll be the one to challenge this Japanese in a month. You're not allowed to compete with me. Why you? I'm going to challenge him tomorrow. Chiba Haowu laughed maniacally. He said to Qin Yin proudly, Qin Yin, did you see that? My lord father had won, he had won again. There's no difference from before. But I didn't expect him to use sword incineration. Who does Fang Yen think he is? Is he worthy of father using sword incineration? Shouldn't you keep such a godly skill and use it as a trump card when you challenge a stronger opponent? Chiba Haowu felt that it was natural for his father to win against Fang Yen. He even stubbornly believed that Fang Yen was so weak that he only needed to use 20% to 30% of his strength. Why did he have to use such a powerful technique? Did he deserve it? Qin Yin looked at the proud Chiba Haowu and said, Fang Yen is nothing. He's worthy of Master using sword incineration. Master knows his opponent better than we do. He knows what kind of opponent he's facing and what kind of technique he should use. Chiba Haowu glanced at Qin Yin's position with dissatisfaction. He didn't like Qin Yin because he was always hiding in the dark, sneaky, and couldn't be seen. Even when his father won a great victory, he still put on a dead face. Someone who didn't even know how to smile was really annoying. Chiba Haowu looked very disheveled after climbing the mountain. She had underestimated this trip. If it wasn't for the woman who kidnapped her helping her from time to time, she wouldn't have been able to climb the steepest peak of Sword Peak. Chiba Haowu widened her eyes at the scene in front of her. Her eyes couldn't help tearing up. She felt very sad. She saw her father go all out. She also saw how talented Fang Yen was. But her language teacher, Fang Yan, still had his chest cut open by her father. How painful would that be? His father was right. He shouldn't have come to watch this match. No matter if he saw his father being killed or his father killing someone, he wouldn't be happy. Phoenix looked at Chiba-Kyu, whose eyes were brimming with tears, and said with a smile, "Are you feeling sad? Why must it be like this?" Chiba-Kaori asked. "Because they are all men with goals," Phoenix said. "This pursuit is too big, so big that little women like us can't understand it at all. I'm not willing to accept it." "Just kill me," Chiba-Kaori said. "What?" Phoenix frowned. "Just kill me," Chiba-Kaori said. "Because my father will definitely kill teacher Fang Yan. It's better to die earlier than later. The earlier I die, the less painful it will be." The Phoenix sneered and said, "Don't worry, the match is not over yet." Of course, the match wasn't over yet. Fang Yan's Tai Chi realm was actually broken by someone. This was the first time. No, the second time. It could also be the third time. The first time was broken by the old drunkard. At that time, he had just comprehended the heart of Tai Chi. He had already used the Tai Chi realm, but he was sent flying by a punch. He couldn't stop it, and he couldn't stop it. The second time was broken by Yiro. That woman could ignore all defenses. She could hit your face whenever she wanted, and she could kick your balls whenever she wanted. This time, it was broken by Chiba-Kyu, a Japanese who came from afar across the ocean. The Japanese sword god had the ability to look down on all the heroes. He deserved the praise and support of the Japanese. Fang Yan looked at the crack on his chest, the open flesh, and the rain of blood. He said with a smile, "Why did you say sorry? Did you want to kill me because you saw my talent? But it's not your fault. I'm indeed the most outstanding young man in the whole of Huaxia." Thinking that Yiro might also be watching from the sidelines, Fang Yan unwillingly added two words, one of. As Fang Yan spoke, he stabbed the hand that was holding Chiba-Kyu's wrist hard. His 5 fingers were like sharp edges, fiercely piercing Chiba-Kyu's wrist, leaving 5 bloody holes on the wall of his hand. Seeing Chiba-Kyu's puzzled look, Fang Yan said with a smile, "Your sword represents death, but Tai Chi represents rebirth. My rebirth is not as good as your death force. So, although I was still tied up by you and my chest was cut by you, when you cut my chest, there would naturally be airflow coming out. So, you found an opportunity." Chiba-Kyu's eyes were full of admiration. "When I used the sword energy to slash open your chest, it was also the moment when the old energy was gone and the new energy hadn't been regenerated. The fleeting opportunity was seized by you. You cut me with your sword, and I made 5 small holes on your body. You are older than me, so I suffered a little loss," Fang Yan said with a smile. "Fang Yan, how about being an East Asian in your next life?" Chiba-Kyu looked at Fang Yan's handsome face and said very seriously, "In that case, I can't bear to kill you. I can feel your sincerity, but I have to refuse, so don't make such a difficult request to others in the future," Fang Yan said angrily. "My father will still be my father in his next life, and my mother will still be my mother in her next life. I will still be born in the Tai Chi Fang family and have the heart of Tai Chi. If an East Asian called Chiba-Kyu comes to challenge me, I will gladly accept the challenge and try my best to kill him. If I can't kill him, I will seriously injure him. If I can't, I will bite him. There are many people in Huaxia. We have many cowards who are afraid of death, but we don't lack hot-blooded and fearless warriors. That makes me want to kill you even more. I've decided a long time ago that I will be a Huaxia man in life and be buried in Huaxia's grave when I die." Fang Yan laughed very heroically. "I don't have enough courage and I don't have enough vigor. I cherish my life very much, but if it's necessary, I don't mind sacrificing it. If you can take it, you can take it. If you can't leave." Chiba-Kyu sighed softly. Such young people were scary, and Huaxia, who had these young people, was the most promising. With a flick of his wrist, Fang Yan's right arm looked as if it had been sliced by countless knives, and countless small wounds appeared. Those were caused by the sword energy. He didn't need to use his fists or feet. Just every joint of his arm could be used as a sword. Chiba-Kyu's cultivation was really profound and terrifying. Fang Yan punched out, and Chiba Kir waved his sleeve to block it. Bang! Fang Yan's fist landed on Qinya Bing's wide sleeve. The sleeve was like an incomparably hard iron plate. Fang Yan blasted a big hole in the ironing board, but his body flew backward. Whoosh! After Fang Yan's body slid on the ground for a while, his head hit a huge rock. Until then, the momentum of his body was exhausted. Before anyone could react, Fang Yan got up from the ground. He didn't like to lie down because he felt that this posture was too ugly. So many fans were looking at him, so he had to work hard to maintain the style of a male god. The clothes on his chest were open, and the mountain wind whistled and slapped his strong and well-proportioned chest. Fang Yan stood as straight as a mountain, without a trace of timidity. Chiba Kir looked at Fang Yan, who was striding toward him, and frowned slightly. His arm was also bleeding, which was a hole made by Fang Yan's claws. His fingers were sharper than a sharp knife, and they forcibly pierced through the skin and flesh, piercing through his arm. He originally wanted to kill Fang Yan with one blow and end the battle cleanly. But he didn't expect that it would be a life and death competition now. The one who persisted until the end would be the final winner. Moreover, an opponent who was not afraid of death was indeed a headache. Fang Yan's body started to sway. He looked like a drunkard who had just returned home. Even his eyes became hazy, as if he couldn't see the world in front of him clearly. His feet stepped on protruding stones several times and he almost fell. His body staggered forward a few steps, and he barely maintained his posture. Fang Yan leaped up and threw a punch at Chiba Shinobu's head. Hiss! His fist was like steel, and his chi was like the Yangtze River. This punch completely subverted the principle and essence of Tai Chi, which used softness to overcome hardness. Using force against force, using tyranny against tyranny. This was what people in Jianghu called hard Tai Chi. Hard Tai Chi used force against force, while soft Tai Chi used little force to overcome great force. Chiba Kir jumped up and kicked Fang Yan's body. Palala! Fang Yan's fist hit the tip of Chiba Kir's foot. The fist energy collided with the sword energy, and the airflow collided, making a harsh explosion. Fang Yan's body fell and flew backward again. Chiba Kir's body fell 3 steps back after landing. Bang! Fang Yan's body hit the big stone. Fang Yan shook his hand and stood up again. Using the cross step, he once again charged toward the Chiba shinobi. There were no fancy skills or complicated movements. It was just a fight of force, a fight of life. Bang! Fang Yan's body was blasted away again. After breaking several small trees in a row, he was stopped by a bigger tree. Fang Yan's throat was sweet, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Chiba Kir's face was expressionless, but a trace of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chiba Kir had been practicing swordsmanship for many years, and his internal force cultivation was indeed better than Fang Yan's. Fang Yan tidied his sweaty hair and struggled to get up again. I'm going to kill him. Fang Yingying was like a red-eyed bull, angrily rushing toward Chiba Kir. He was going to kill him. Or be killed by him. Bang! A leather boot appeared and kicked him in the face, sending him flying back. Hero Fang, who was sprinting forward, was kicked in the stomach before he could even turn around. He tumbled back to his original position. What are you doing, you crazy woman? Fang Yingying roared at Yi-Ro. It was the first time that he dared to speak to the violent woman like this. If you don't go help, why don't you let us go? Fang Haohan also stared at Yi-Ro fiercely, his chest rising and falling. It seemed that he was about to explode. Watch carefully. This is his fight, and he wants to fight fair and square. He doesn't want anyone to help him. If he needed help, he would have gone back to ask the old drunkard for help. Why would he need you two idiots to call back for help? Yi-Ro's face was gloomy, and she clenched her fists tightly. If he dies, I'll go challenge him. If I die, the old drunkard will go challenge him. If all the masters of our Fang family are dead, there are other heroes from Huaxia to challenge him. It's not your turn to die. Chapter 271. Why can't we just die? We're also men of the Fang family, Fang Yingying roared angrily. After a pause, he stared blankly at Yi-Ro and said, Did you just say, we're from the Fang family? Shut up. Yi-Ro stared at Fang Yingying fiercely, like a female leopard that was about to go crazy and bite someone. Do you believe that I won't throw you two to the bottom of the mountain? Fong Haohan quickly shrank his neck, thinking that he didn't say anything wrong. Fong Ying was extremely depressed. He ran back and forth like a trapped beast and said, "No, I'm going crazy. I want to kill. I want to kill." Yi Ro sneered and said, "Go kill if you want to. What are you shouting for?" "You won't let me challenge the Qianye military department again," Fong Ying said angrily. His eyes lit up and he said, "What do you mean? Get lost." Fong Ying winked at Fong Haohan, and the two ran away together. He said, "Let's get lost now, right now." Soon, Fong Ying and Fong Haohan rolled to the front of Qianye Haohan. Qin Yin, who had been hiding in the dark, finally showed up and stood in front of Qianye Haohan. He stared at Fong Ying and Fong Haohan with vigilance and said, "What do you want?" Qin Yin had been studying the Huaxia culture with his master, but his Huaxia language was not standard, so he had to listen very hard to understand. Of course, Fong Ying and Fong Haohan didn't want to understand too well. Fong Ying pointed at Qianye Haohan and waved his fist at him. "I want to challenge you," Fong Ying said. Qianye Haowu was furious. Although he didn't understand what Fong Ying was saying, he could understand Fong Ying's actions. He raised his sword and was about to accept Fong Ying's challenge. Qin Yin blocked Qianye Haowu once again, then looked at Fong Ying and said, "I challenge you. Your target is me." Fong Ying was amused. He pointed at Chiba Haomu and said, "Why doesn't that little bastard dare to accept the challenge? Is he afraid of losing?" "He's still a minor," Qin Yin said. "Are you going to bully a child?" Fong Ying was stunned and said, "I'm also a child. What's wrong with a child challenging another child? Why can't he fight with me?" Qin Yin carefully looked at Fong Ying's chubby face. He really couldn't treat him as a child. "Tell him to admit defeat," Fong Ying said. "If you tell him to admit defeat, I won't challenge him. I'll challenge you." "What is he saying?" Qianye Haowu stood behind Qin Yin and asked in an unfriendly tone. "They want to challenge you," Qin Yin said. "Damn it." Qianye Haowu sneered. "Tell them that I accept their challenge. If you die, what's the point of your father winning this match?" Qin Yin asked. Qianye Haowu's face alternated between green and white. He hesitated again and finally said to Qin Yin, "I'll leave this matter to you. Don't let down the prestige of a martial artist." Although Qianye Haowu was young and impetuous, he wasn't an idiot. His father was beating up Fong Yan. At this time, Fong Yan's two friends took the initiative to come to him, obviously wanting to get back at him. He wasn't afraid of such a challenge, but what if those Huaxia people cheated? One of them was fat and chubby, the other was skinny and shriveled. Both of them were obviously not good people. Qin Yin sighed in relief. He was afraid that this young man would do something stupid. Qin Yin looked at Fong Ying and spoke in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. "He's willing to admit defeat. He's no match for you right now. Do you have any backbone?" Fong Ying was furious. His opponent's choice made him very disappointed and regretful. In his estimation, after hearing his challenge, that brat should have drawn his sword in anger, only to be beaten to a pulp. He didn't think he'd admit defeat like that. Qin Yin's head was hidden under his hoodie, so his expression couldn't be seen. He looked at Fong Ying, made an inviting gesture and said, "I know what you want to do. I don't mind being tricked. If you want to challenge me, I'll accept." Fong Ying nodded and said, "That would be for the best. I just want to kill someone, as long as it's one of your people." "As you wish," Qin Yin replied. After that, his body disappeared, then reappeared behind Fong Ying, slashing at Fong Ying's neck. Fong Yingxiong spun on the spot like a fat spinning top. He cleverly dodged the saber and sent a palm strike towards Qin Yin's chest. Qin Yin didn't think that this fatso would have such quick reflexes and speed. From Qin Yin's perspective, this guy's speed should be about the same as his own. This was the most agile fatso that Qin Yin had ever come into contact with. Once his attack failed, he turned around and ran. Qin Yin was a jonin as well as a hitman, so he knew when to advance and when to retreat. Fong Ying had no way to vent his anger, so how could he just let him go? Using his cross plum blossom steps, He quickly ran towards Qing Yin. It made his body invisible. While Fang Yingying and Qing Yin were busy fighting, Fang Haohan looked at Chiba Haomu, his hands itching to beat him up. However, Qing Yin had already admitted defeat on Chiba Haomu's behalf, so he couldn't just run over and beat him up for no reason, right? That would be too rude and he would be laughed at. So, Fang Haohan looked at Chiba Haomu and said, "I want to challenge you. Do you accept my challenge?" "Bastard. What the hell do you Huaxia people want?" Chiba Haomu was really angry. He knew that these guys didn't have good intentions, but he couldn't understand Huaxia language, so he couldn't express his anger. Even if he shouted, it was in English. He knew that if he spoke Japanese, the vegetable in front of him wouldn't be able to understand. Fang Yingying was tall and thin, like a small tree. In Chiba Haomu's eyes, he was a vegetable. Fang Haohan was overjoyed and shouted, "What? You accept my challenge? You want to fight me to the death? If that's the case, let's fight." So, Fang Haohan happily rushed towards Chiba Haomu. He didn't understand English, but he knew that the old guys watching on the sidelines didn't either. How many times did he get up after being knocked down? Fang Yen couldn't remember, but Yi Ro remembered it clearly. The 9th time. This was the 9th time that Fang Yen was sent flying by Chiba Haomu. Sometimes, Fang Yen could get the upper hand. For example, he hit Chiba Haomu's chest with his palm, scratched his shoulder with his claw, or even forced him to take 2 steps back when the two of them collided. But most of the time, Fang Yen was at a disadvantage. He attacked fiercely and fought with Chiba Haomu in such a way that he almost didn't care about his own life. It seemed really stupid to hurt one's own life. But he didn't care. "I've been smart my whole life. Let me be stupid this time," Fang Yen said to himself. When Chiba Haomu came to challenge him, he knew that he couldn't retreat. He couldn't admit defeat. He had persisted until now with the stubbornness of a child. Didn't it look stupid? Yes, it was. But there were too many smart people in Huaxia. There had to be a few such fools. They didn't want to live, and they weren't afraid of death. In the face of the alien race's challenge, they didn't give in or take a step back. They wouldn't retreat even if they died. Sadly, Fang Yan's injuries were getting worse. The flesh on his chest was torn open because of the fierce fight. Not only did the bleeding not slow down, but it was also getting faster and faster. Fortunately, he had brought a layer of golden chrysalis muscle-nourishing powder. Otherwise, he would have died from excessive blood loss. His clothes were tattered, and his face was full of scars. Because every time he was lying on the ground, his head would hit a rock or a tree, and his whole head would be bloody. The blood on his face made him look like a man-eating devil who had just crawled out of hell. Fang Yen, Yi Ro couldn't help but call out. Fang Yen waved his hand in the direction of Yi Ro and said, "Don't wait for me. Find a good man and marry him." Yi Ro was so angry that she couldn't speak. "Who said I'd wait for you? What does it have to do with you whether I get married or not?" Fang Yen stood in front of Chiba Haomu for the 9th time. He grinned and said with a charmingly naive look, "It's time to end this." "It's time to end this," Chiba Haomu also said. He wanted to end this battle as soon as possible because he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to do it if the fight continued. He was really an excellent young man. Unfortunately, he wasn't an East Asian. He pulled out his right hand, and a silver light appeared in his palm. A soft sword. There was a soft sword tied to his waist. Chiba Haomu raised his right hand high, and the sword soared into the sky. The soft sword swayed and made a crackling sound in the air. That was the sound of the sword energy colliding with the air. Fang Yan's footsteps paused slightly. This sword is called Unfathomable, derived from the unfathomable meaning of swordsmanship, Chiba Haomu said. "You can choose a weapon that suits you best," Chiba Haomu said. Chiba Haomu was stunned and murmured, "Father, he also uses a sword?" Chiba Haomu didn't know how many years it had been, but she had never seen her father use a sword. She thought that the sword had merged with her father's body, and everyone else said so. "Despicable," Phoenix said with dissatisfaction. The Japanese sword god actually took the initiative to use a sword in a fight with a weak little boy. It was extremely shameless. "Don't you have any shame?" Fang Yan's body trembled with anger. He pointed at Chiba Haomu and cursed. "You're good at using a sword, so you prepared a soft sword at your waist in advance, ready to strike me at the critical moment. You're too insidious, too cunning. How can I have an opponent like you?" Fang Yen took out a silver ball from the leather bag at his waist and said, "Fortunately, I was prepared. Otherwise, I would have died because of you. This bullet is called Shadan, because it won't explode unless I press it," Fang Yen said. As he spoke, he pressed a miniature button on the silver bullet and threw it at the location of the Chiba Shinobi Division. Chapter 272. As a descendant of an ancient martial arts family, Fang Yen admired the most about living a heroic life and dying a carefree death. Of course, he couldn't do either of those things. If someone wanted to write an epitaph for him after his death, it could only be written, "A cheap and shameless man." Or it could be said that people who lived longer were really cheap. Fang Yen had always thought of himself as a smart person, but smart people also made mistakes. For example, Fang Yen had made a mistake now. When he threw the silver fool in his hand at Chiba Shinobu had already disappeared from his original position. Too fast. Chiba Shinobu's speed was too fast. Before the fool had time to explode, he had already dodged it. This kind of hot weapon was extremely lethal to ordinary people, and it was impossible to defend against it. But for Fang Yen and Chiba Shinobu, it really wasn't very useful, because the reaction speed of the weapon couldn't keep up with the reaction speed of their bodies. This was an era where hot weapons were king, but it was also an era where hot weapons were in the hands of the people who controlled them. The long sword was like a spitting spirit snake, fiercely attacking Fang Yan's chest. Fang Yan's body retreated again and again, not daring to touch the sharp edge of the sword. If it was Fang Yingying using the sword, Fang Yan was 90% sure that he could stop the sword. If it was Fang Haohen using the sword, Fang Yen was 80% sure that he could snatch the sword. If it was Chiba Shinobu using the sword, and Fang Yen still had to use his flesh and blood to fight, there was a 100% chance that this sword would cut off his limbs. Chiba pushed off the ground with the tip of his foot and flew forward. Like a white ape hunting its prey, he stabbed at Fang Yan's chest, lianquan, zigong, abdomen, middle wrist, tai, and other major acupoints. The tip of the sword wavered, like a spirit snake looking for a gap to bite. The buzzing sound was endless, bringing great psychological pressure to people. Fang Yen suddenly stood still. He stretched out his hand and tore the robe off his body. He waved his robe to wrap around the soft sword. With a flick of his wrist, the white robe was cut into countless pieces. Just as he was about to follow up with another attack, a strange sound came from behind him. Without thinking, he slashed out with his sword. Bang! The silver foolish egg was split open, and the green liquid inside splashed everywhere. "I've been tricked." Of course, Fang Yen knew that Sha Dan's speed couldn't keep up with the speed of the Thousand Leaves army. If the sword god was so easy to kill, the armory could use this kind of hot gun to rob all the masters in the world. Therefore, when he threw the silver bullet, Fang Yen curled his finger a little, and there was a little spinning force in it. It was like the roundhouse ball in table tennis. When you saw the opponent's ball was about to jump in front of you, you hit it with your racket, only to find that the ball's trajectory had changed again and actually jumped out from under your racket. The silver bullet passed by Thousand Leaves Army. Thousand Leaves Army thought that the crisis was over. But he didn't know that the real crisis hadn't arrived yet. When Fang Yen took off his clothes to wrap around his soft sword, it was to create pressure on him so that he didn't have too much time to pay attention to what was flying behind him. When the two sides were fighting fiercely, something flew behind them. Thousand Leaves Army mistook it as a sneak attack and slashed at it. He was very confident in his swordsmanship. It was also because of his overconfidence in his swordsmanship that he broke the silver ball and released the green liquid inside. This was also what Fang Yen wanted to achieve. Originally, he was too embarrassed to take it out, but the old guy Thousand Leaves Army was shameless enough to take out his sword to slash people, so Fang Yen naturally used his secret weapon. But it was a little too shameless. The body of Thousand Leaves Army's sword was like his body. When the sword touched the flying object, he already knew that the situation was not good. He flew to escape, but Fang Yen used the stick formula of Tai Chi to hold him back and make him unable to move. Thousand Leaves' army suddenly used his chi, and the wide-sleeved robe on his body was vigorously peeled off and took the initiative to stick to the green liquid. Most of the liquid was blocked by the clothes filled with chi. After a large area of the clothes was corroded, the liquid fell to the ground. There were also a few green dots that were not blocked by the clothes and landed on Chiba Shinobu's naked upper body. Sizzle, it was the sound of flesh and skin being corroded and burned. As the green liquid entered, the flesh and bones would be burned out, until the effect of the drug completely disappeared. Even Thousand Leaves' army, who was made of iron and steel, looked ferocious when suffering this kind of pain, and his body was trembling in pain. But he didn't say a word. He held the sword and went straight to Fang Yan's eyes. The severe pain in his body completely enraged Thousand Leaves' army. He also had to use more crazy attacks to relieve the pain of his flesh and bones being melted, which was simply unbearable for human beings. Compared with this kind of pain, the so-called 10 most cruel men of the Qing dynasty were nothing. When Thousand Leaves' army attacked wildly with his sword, the smile on Fang Yan's face disappeared. He closed his eyes again and let the long sword stab into his eye hole. The heart of Tai Chi was used again, and the Tai Chi domain appeared again. The world became still, like an ink painting hanging on the wall. The color of the mountain soil, the trembling grass, the chirping of insects and birds, everything was clearly visible. The tip of the sword no longer trembled. It turned out that it had always been in this state, and all the phantoms were deceiving. The blade arrived in an instant, trying to pierce Fang Yan's pupils. Fang Yan's expression was solemn, and he slowly reached out his hand. Clang! There was a sound of gold and iron colliding. One of Fang Yan's fingers touched the blade of the sword. His head and the blade of the sword crossed. It was the sword that should have pierced Fang Yan's eyes, but the sword didn't twist, and Fang Yan's head didn't twist either. They met each other in a straight line, but they just strangely missed each other. Fang Yan slapped Thousand Leaves' army's abdomen with his palm. It was a light, soft palm that did not contain any strength. It was more like a touch than a slap. Before Chiba Shinobu could react, his stomach suddenly became extremely hot. His abdomen was protruding as if someone had stuffed a child inside. Puff! His stomach was like a balloon that was full of air, and it suddenly rose high. The balloon exploded, and his stomach sank again. Take advantage of his weakness and kill him. Fang Yan took advantage of the fact that Chiba Shinobi was unable to move and kicked him in the face. Thousand Leaves' army's body flew backward, and after landing he still staggered back. After taking more than a dozen steps back, he stopped in a sorry state. The soft sword in his hand was stabbed into the ground, and the body of the sword was hard and straight to support his body. Dark red blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and then it became a darker purplish black. This was the first time that Thousand Leaves' army was sent flying by Fang Yan. This was also the first time that Thousand Leaves' army bled in front of Fang Yan. Beautiful! An old man in the darkness laughed. This kid is interesting. He fights with strength and uses skill. He only uses skill and doesn't use strength. He looks like a sissy. If he only uses strength and doesn't use skill, he's just a brute. He'll never be able to achieve anything great. Old thing, don't you know shame? This kid used a bomb to blow people up. This is a sneak attack. It's a shame to be associated with him. What do you know? That old guy doesn't use a sword? That's a cold weapon my ass. Go and touch the sword in his hand. I'm afraid it's hotter than burning coals. Fang Yan smiled happily and said, Look, no matter how many times you beat me, I only want to beat you one last time. You used a bomb, Thousand Leaves' army said calmly. He felt that he had been insulted, that their contest had been tainted. A duel between peerless experts. They've already climbed to such a high place, how could they use a bomb to attack? If Shimen Chue Shui and Yi Gucheng finally climbed to the top of the Forbidden City, they would each take out a gun from their pockets and shoot at each other. Just thinking about it made him feel cute. That's my weapon, Fang Yan said. It's the same as the sword in your hand. They're both weapons. Thousand Leaves' army chuckled and said, Is that also considered a weapon used by martial artists in a duel? Of course it is, Fang Yan said. You've never played a game before, right? Some weapons are simple and realistic, like the soft sword in your hand. But my idiot added special effects, so when it explodes, it's cooler. The conflict between ancient martial arts and firearms has been at loggerheads for so many years. Martial artists train their bodies, skills, and chi, while firearms focus on simplicity, efficiency, and speed. You should stick to the path of ancient martial arts. Firearms are not advisable, it will make people slack off, so try not to use them as much as possible. Thousand Leaves Army lectured like an elder. Shouldn't you wait until you're on the verge of death to say these words? At that time, the effect should be better, Fang Yan advised. Thousand Leaves Army licked the blood on the corner of his mouth and smiled gently. It's been a long time since I've tasted fresh blood, I really miss it. You're right, no matter how many times I win, you only need to win one last time. Thousand Leaves Army's figure became illusory, but his voice was still as clear as ever. The last time hasn't come yet, so the winner might not necessarily be you. Before he finished speaking, the tree behind Fang Yan's previous position had been cut in half for no reason. Fang Yan dashed towards the huge rock, and sword marks immediately appeared on the surface of the huge rock. Large and small pieces of rock fell off, but the sword didn't make any sound when it cut the rock. It looked very strange. The sky was filled with Thousand Leaves Army's phantom, jumping up and down as he moved. The sword chi was extremely sharp. It drew a prison and trapped Fang Yan within it, preventing him from escaping. Sword array. The ultimate interpretation of swordsmanship that humans could understand. Chapter 273. They raised their glasses and drank to the moon, forming a trio. Jiang Zhulu didn't use his binoculars to watch the fight on the top of the mountain. Instead, he gave the binoculars to the bodyguard behind him and told him to keep an eye on the situation and report back to him. Jiang Zhulu, Lu Qingming, and Lan Shanggu, who arrived last, drank and chatted merrily as if they were on a vacation in the wilderness. Because Lan Shanggu joined, Jiang Zhulu and Lu Qingming couldn't talk about cooperation. The businesses of the three were related and competitive, so they weren't afraid of not having a common language. 3 of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing are here today. This is really fate. Lan Shanggu laughed and said, "How many years has it been since the 4 prodigies of Huaqing gathered together? In my memory, the 4 prodigies of Huaqing have never really gathered together, right?" Jiang Zhulu asked back. "Old Mei is so boring. He stays in his room all day and doesn't come out. Who knows what he's busy with?" Lan Shanggu complained loudly. "That's because his name is Mei." Jiang Zhulu laughed and added, "The 4 prodigies of Huaqing in the eyes of bored people were Jiang Zhulu of the Jiang family, Lan Shanggu of the Lan family, Lu Shu of the Lu family, and Mei Yingxue of the Mei family. Apparently, Mei Yingxue didn't like this name and thought it was too feminine, so he changed his name to Mei. Mei was actually quite interesting. He went into business and became a business genius. He went into painting and became a painting genius. He went into antiques and became a collector king. He went into dragonflies and became the most famous dragonfly research expert in the country. Oh right, his research on snakes and bears was also very profound. He published many influential papers both at home and abroad. No one knew what he was researching now. They only knew that the last paper he published was related to body fragrance, so everyone knew that he was researching women's body fragrance. He rarely appeared in public. The only time he made a grand appearance was when he was 18 years old and the Mei family held a banquet for his coming-of-age ceremony. Because of his handsome appearance, he immediately captured the hearts of countless young ladies. Therefore, Mei Yingxue, who only appeared once, instantly became one of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing and the most mysterious existence. Thinking about it made people feel a bit unsatisfied. Lu Qingming's expression was calm, but his mood was unusually excited. Lan Shanggu said that 3 of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing had arrived today. Did that mean that he had already become one of the 4 prodigies of Huaqing? Would he truly be accepted by these top-notch young masters of Flower City? He knew that as long as he didn't make any mistakes, he would definitely be able to replace the willow tree. However, the four prodigies of Huaqing not only had to have deep connections, they also had to have the ability, the means, the intelligence, and the looks. There was no need to mention Meiying Xue, that sissy was ridiculously beautiful. Jiang Zhulu was refined and scholarly, Lu Shu was free and unrestrained, Lan Shanggu was valiant and ferocious. They were all the best men in the world. Now, would he be able to keep pace with them? Lu Qingming acted as if he didn't care about that kind of thing at all and said with a smile, "Good looks always have an advantage. I wonder what that person from the Mei family is researching right now." Who cares? Lan Shanggu shrugged indifferently. "We'll know when he publishes his research paper." Jiang Zhulu laughed and said, "He is a wonderful person." Lu Qingming pointed to the top of the mountain and said, "Is that person up there not a wonderful person?" "He is." Lan Shanggu said, "He is one of the most wonderful people I've ever seen." Jiang Zhulu looked at Lan Shanggu thoughtfully and said, "Does your Lan family really want to ride on his coattails that much? Besides, your coattails aren't that thick right now." "My two brothers, let's not beat around the bush in front of honest people. Our Lan family indeed values this project very much. If we can obtain the right to sell the product of the Rubik's Cube technology, with our network channels, it won't be a problem for us to live a few years in peace. So, my two brothers, please support us." Jiang Zhulu laughed and said, "Support? Of course support. The problem is, what if the Rubik's Cube technology is in our hands? If the Jiang family has the Rubik's Cube, I'll talk to the Jiang family. If the Lu family has the Rubik's Cube, I'll talk to the Lu family. Whoever has the Rubik's Cube, I'll talk to them. I know there are some people who don't like Fang Yen, but our Lan family only cares about the matter and not the person. We just want to earn some money quietly." Since Lan Shanggu had already stated his family's position, Jiang Zhulu and Lu Qingming naturally wouldn't pursue this issue. They didn't have the right to prohibit the Lan family from doing business with Chaoyin technology. As long as their butts didn't lean towards them, it was fine. The matter of Lan Shanggu entertaining Fang Yen at the Blue Sky Club had already attracted the attention of many people. "Come, let's drink." Jiang Zhulu took the initiative to raise his glass and invite them to drink. "Good wind, good moon, good brother, we must drink at this time, we must drink." The three of them raised their glasses at the same time and said, "We must drink." Chiba Haoru felt like she was about to die. When her father, Chiba Haobu, cut Fang Yen, she was extremely sad. When she saw Fang Yen trick her father and cause him to bleed, she was also sad. What made her even more depressed was that Qing Yin was entangled by a fatso, and her brother, Chiba Haomu, was dragged into battle by a thin man. She knew that fatso and that thin man were props used by Mr. Fang during his lectures, and they were also good friends of Mr. Fang. Because her father challenged Mr. Fang, they went to challenge Qing Yin and Chiba Haomu to vent their anger. Chiba Haoru felt a deep sense of powerlessness in her heart. This was Huaxia, where there were many talented people and experts. Was it really worth it for her father to do this? He wanted to make Japanese kendo famous, he wanted to pave the way for Japanese martial artists, he wanted to pursue the supreme kendo, but, Lord Father, this was Huaxia. If you challenge one person from Huaxia, there will be 100 people from Huaxia standing up. They bully your disciple, humiliate your son, kidnap your daughter. There are too many of them, and they are too powerful. Even if you defeat teacher Fang Yen, do you really win this competition? What? You don't want to accept it? Seeing the sadness on Chiba Haoru's little face, Phoenix smiled and said, "But this is really difficult for you. On one side is your father, and on the other side is the teacher you like. If you have to choose one, it will really be very painful. But in the end, you will choose your father, right?" "Yes," Chiba Haoru said. "I hope that my father can win this competition. Because he has given up everything for this competition, and the only thing left is to win. But that's not why I'm not satisfied." "Then why are you not satisfied?" Phoenix asked. In the short time they spent together, she realized that this little girl was very intelligent and insightful. She was not like an ordinary high school girl. "I'm not satisfied that Huaxia is too big. I'm not satisfied that there are too many Chinese. I'm not satisfied that your land is fertile. I'm not satisfied that your resources are vast. I'm not satisfied that you have thousands of years of cultural heritage. I'm not satisfied that you have too many experts. My father can only challenge teacher Fang Yan, but his two friends went to challenge my younger brother and my father's disciple. And you, and those experts hidden in the dark, who among them dares to challenge? We humans are all God's people. Why is God so biased towards you guys? Can God really see all of this? Phoenix chuckled and said, "This is Huaxia. This is the Huaxia. We can look down on others, others can't ignore us. We can challenge others, others can't provoke us. We can bully others, others can't take revenge on us. Not satisfied? Not satisfied? Come and hit me if you can." Chiba Haru felt that there was nothing more to say to this crazy woman. Phoenix patted Chiba Haru's head and said, "Actually, you can also become a Huaxia person. For example, you can marry a Huaxia man." "No, I'm Japanese," Chiba Haru said with a determined expression. Fang Yingying was the fastest fatso in the world. Of course, that was what he thought. However, Fang Yingying was indeed good at speed. His body size was inversely proportional to his fat body size. When he and Qing Yin unleashed their speed at the same time, it could be said that they were the brightest. The two of them fought with speed. One was a round meatball, but his attacks were extremely heavy. The other was like a black shadow, retracting his hand as soon as it reached out, almost never clashing directly with Fang Yingying. Fang Yingying's consecutive frontal attacks were all dodged by Qing Yin. He was extremely angry, clenching his teeth as he charged towards Qing Yin. "This bastard, if you're so good, let me give you a few solid punches. What kind of hero are you running around all the time?" Thinking that he couldn't be considered a hero, Fang Yingying felt a bit better. Not everyone could be a hero. On Fang Haohen's side, the battle was even more intense. No, it was a shouting match. Fang Haohen sent Qinya Haowu flying with a thunderous punch and shouted, "You despicable bastard, you dare to use the monkey steals the peach to ambush me. You want to cut off my descendants? I'll fight you to the death." Fang Haohen used the bone-shrinking hand to slap Qinya Haowu's chest, causing him to spit out blood. He shouted even louder, "You dare to insult my mother? Even though I don't know who my mother is, I respect her a lot. I'll fight you to the death." Fang Haohen kicked Qinya Haowu's balls, looked at his twisted face and cursed, "You despicable bastard, you dare to use the monkey steals the peach to ambush me? You want to cut off my descendants? I'll fight you to the death." Yi Rose stomped her foot on the side. "This idiot, you've already used this excuse just now." Bam. Fang Haohen punched Qinya Haowu's face and angrily said, "You dare to call me ugly? How am I ugly? How am I ugly? I'm so skinny, how can I be ugly?" Qinya Haowu could no longer hear what Fang Haohen was shouting. He fell on the pile of rocks, foaming at the mouth and covered in blood. Chapter 274. On the rugged mountain path, a row of black-clothed people moved quickly and silently. They were climbing the back mountain of One Sword Peak, which didn't even have a mountain path. It was a completely deserted area. Thorns, poisonous insects, steep slopes, and rocks that could fall at any time. It was a hair-raising walk. This group of black-clothed people were dressed uniformly and strangely. They wore black hats that looked like swimming caps, and they wore tight-fitting black fiber uniforms. Each of them carried a barrel-shaped bag. With one person in the lead, everyone followed. The black-clothed person in the lead looked up and waved his hand. The group of black-clothed people behind him immediately spread out and entered the dark mountain. They came without a shadow and left without a trace. Apart from a few lonely birds that were occasionally startled, no one knew the secret of their arrival. Chiba Bing's body soared into the air, slashing left and right with his sword. There was no sound, no shadow, only the sword energy could be seen. The trees behind Fang Yan, the rocks that he dodged, the flowers and grass on the trees were all cut into pieces by the sword energy. Fang Yan took a step forward and slashed at his chest. Fang Yan quickly retreated, and another sword slashed at his back. Fang Yan spun on the spot and slashed at the top of his head. Because of the formation, there was nowhere to hide. Fang Yan's space to move became smaller and smaller. This was also Chiba Bing's deliberate intention. When he was only 3 feet away, he would enter a dead end. No one in the world could save him. Fang Yen had already used Drunken Crane riding the wind to the extreme. His body was like a small boat on the ocean. He ran here and there in a sorry state. I can't do this anymore, Fang Yen thought. He also knew what Chiba Bing was planning. He was trying his best to reduce his space to move. When he couldn't dodge, he could only be beheaded by Chiba Bing. Unfortunately, Sha Dan had already been used. Otherwise, if he threw Sha Dan at Chiba Bing in the air, he wouldn't dare to use his sword to slash at him. In that case, he might be able to escape from the sword formation. The flesh on the wound on his chest opened up more and more. Because of the intense exercise, blood gushed out again. Even the golden chrysalis muscle-nourishing powder was washed away. Without the obstruction of the golden chrysalis muscle-nourishing powder, the blood flowed even more unbridled. Fang Yan's body was getting more and more tired, and his footsteps were getting heavier. Of course, he couldn't care less at this moment. This was the darkness before dawn, the frozen earth before the ice and snow melted, and the heavy rain before the sunset filled the sky. He had to persevere. He didn't care how many times Chiba Shinobi had won before. He just needed to win one last time. Besides, the old guy from the Chiba army didn't say that he was tired. How could a young man with good teeth and a good appetite say that he was tired? Another large rock was shaved off by the sword Chi. Of course, the originally huge rock had been shaved into a flat top by the Chiba Shinobi. The stone rolled to the ground, blocking Fang Yan's path of retreat. However, if Fang Yan moved forward, he would face the sharpest sword of the Chiba army. He couldn't move to the left because the Chiba army's sword Chi still remained there. He couldn't move to the right because the Chiba army had just withdrawn his sword from the right. The speed of the Chiba army was too fast. He could launch hundreds of swords in a second, and those hundreds of swords formed a dense spider web. It was really not easy for a mosquito like Fang Yan to pass through the spider web. Fang Yan stood still and let the long sword attack him. The Chiba army didn't disappoint Fang Yan and slashed at his neck. This was a horizontal sword. Perhaps because of the excitement of drinking blood, the long sword, which had been silent all this time, actually let out a long cry. Fang Yan closed his eyes and displayed the heart of Taiji again. The Taiji domain was fully displayed, bringing him into another world. He was not convinced. He wanted to try again. He wanted to try again to see if the Chiba army's sword was faster or if his hands were faster in the Taiji domain. He could only try again because in his skill box, only the heart of Taiji had a chance to match the unique skill of the Chiba army's sword array. The heart of Taiji was a domain, and so was the sword array. Now, Fang Yan was going to use his own domain to fight against the Chiba army's domain. This was one of his few options. Puff! The clothes on Fang Yan's body, which had long been cut into pieces by the sword Chi, burst open, and he blocked the front of the Chiba army. At this time, Fang Yan's upper body was completely naked. Of course, this move was very difficult, so it was recommended not to easily imitate it. Some people could only shake the clothes on the upper half of their bodies, while others couldn't control it well and shook the lower half of their bodies. The wind blew on their buttocks, and their balls were exposed. That would be too embarrassing. The Chiba army didn't even look at it. He even imitated Fang Yan and closed his eyes. Two pretentious fellows, someone cursed in the darkness. But this time, no one responded. Whether it was Yi Wen, Phoenix Chiba, and the others on the surface or the unknown person hiding in the darkness, everyone was waiting. They were waiting for the most intense battle to arrive, waiting for the peak collision between the successor of Taiji and the Japanese sword god. The Chiba army's body finally appeared in the darkness. His expression was serious, but his hand that was wielding the sword was calm. He had long reached the state of being one with the sword. These swords were his hands, his feet, and a part of his body. No matter how long he used them or how intense the movements he did, he still had absolute control over them. In Fang Yan's Taiji domain, the Chiba army's face and sword were clear. Fang Yan could even see his naked upper body. Even the few hairs on his chest and the two little eyes were undisguised in Fang Yan's mind. Fang Yen quickly diverted his attention. He had looked at the wrong place just now and almost kicked him out of the Taiji domain. The speed of the sword was very fast, but in Fang Yan's mind, it seemed to be moving slowly. Yes, in this domain, the speed of all objects was slower than the speed of Fang Yan's eyes. Because he was the only king in this world. Whoosh! Suddenly, the speed of the sword increased. If the speed was 1 in the past, it had increased to 9 now. It was getting faster and faster, so fast that Fang Yan's eyes couldn't keep up with the speed. The sword also became more and more blurry. He could no longer see the trajectory of the sword clearly. This shocked Fang Yen. He had never encountered such a thing before. Could it be that in his Taiji domain, he was no longer the king, but was being controlled by someone else? Whoosh! Fang Yan's mind suddenly exploded, and a colorful rain of stars fell. They flew about, drawing one beautiful arc after another in his boundless mind. The clear images in his mind had disappeared, and now the flowers and grass had become bright spots and lines. Hashirama Chiba's body turned into a moving dot of light, and the long sword he swung was a glowing line. Fang Yen stretched out his hand. Crack, crack, Fang Yan's hand pierced through the sword chi surrounding the long sword. The sword chi exploded, giving off a strange sound. However, the sword energy didn't hurt Fang Yen. Fang Yan's hand finally grasped the blade of Chiba Abe's sword. This was impossible in the past, but it was happening right in front of his eyes. The heart of Taiji, the heart follows Taiji. Sometimes, it's not you who thinks about how to fight, but the heart of Taiji will lead you to fight. This was what the old drunkard said to Fang Yen. The old drunkard was a martial arts genius. Until now, no one dared to refute this. What he said was naturally very reasonable. Taiji was the protagonist, and people were the carrier of Taiji. This was the state that Fang Yen could experience. However, he didn't know what kind of state it was. Did it evolve, or did it deteriorate? Did the heart of Taiji upgrade, or did it mutate? Among a million Taiji practitioners, one lucky person might understand the heart of Taiji. Each of the 10 Taiji practitioners who understood the heart of Taiji had a different growth process. Some of them reached the sky in one step and achieved the diamond body. Some of them fell into hell, and their bodies and emotions changed. The heart of Taiji disappeared for no reason. The reason why Fang Yen ran away was that he couldn't feel the existence of the heart of Taiji. Instead of saying that he was afraid that Yiro would beat him up, he was afraid that the heart of Taiji would never come back. Therefore, after the heart of Taiji returned, he wouldn't feel embarrassed even if Yiro beat him up in front of hundreds of teachers and students. Instead, he was secretly happy. Look at me, look at how much I've been beaten up. The long sword stopped moving forward, and Hashirama's body also froze in the air. Hashirama lowered his head and looked at the long sword in his hand. He sighed softly and said, "You understand?" "Yes," Fang Yen said. "What did you understand?" "I don't know," Fang Yen said. He really didn't know what he had understood. He didn't even know if he had understood it or not. Hashirama asked him if he had understood it, but he was too embarrassed to say that he hadn't. That would be really embarrassing. "You have indeed comprehended it," Chiba Shinobu said and sighed deeply again. His high spirit was gone, and so was his sword. The soul of the invincible Japanese god of swordsmanship was suddenly taken away. He was a little dispirited and said, "I've practiced swordsmanship all my life, and I've sought the way of heaven. Even heaven is helping you. What can I do?" Fighting with heaven was endless joy. Fighting with earth was endless joy. Was that really the case? Was the power of heaven and earth something a mere martial artist could consume? Fang Yen didn't care about that. He only remembered a saying, "Take advantage of your enemy's weakness." Just as Qianye was feeling melancholic, Fang Yen slapped his chest with his palm. The long sword in Hashirama's hand fell, and his body fell toward the cliff of one sword peak like a paper kite without a string. Chapter 275. Father! Chiba Kori cried out anxiously. She blurted out in Japanese. Right now, no one cared whether others could understand her or not. She had witnessed her father being slapped down the cliff of One Sword Peak by Fang Yan's palm. The cliff was so high that she and the woman who kidnapped her had to climb it for half an hour, and they had to start climbing from the middle of the mountain. If her father fell down like that, wouldn't he die? She was heartbroken. Tears flowed out of her eyes as she rushed toward the spot where Chiba Hajime had fallen. Phoenix grabbed her arm and shouted, "Stop! You are now my captive. Whether you live or die is up to me. Let me go." Chiba Kaori struggled with all her might. Ever since she met Phoenix, their conversation had been very pleasant. Even when she was kidnapped, she still had a smile on her face. This was the first time she tried to break free from Phoenix's control. With a flick of her wrist, Chiba Kaori fell to the ground. "I don't have tender feelings for the fairer sex," Phoenix said with a cold smile. Chiba Haomu had just opened his eyes when he happened to see his father's body falling down the cliff. His eyes were wide open. He couldn't imagine how his father had failed. He was the invincible Japanese sword god, the faith of Japanese samurai, and the totem of kendo. How could he have lost? He got up, ignoring the pain in his body, and rushed toward the cliff where his father had disappeared. Qin Yin had already stopped fighting with Fang Yinging. The moment he saw his master, Chiba Hajime, being beaten down the mountain by Fang Yen, he was dumbfounded. He knew how powerful Chiba Hajime was. He also knew how powerful Fang Yen was. Fang Yen, that bastard, did he use Shadan again? Fang Yinging was also dumbfounded. He was really dumbfounded. He didn't expect Junior Martial Uncle to win. How did Junior Martial Uncle win? Logically speaking, Junior Martial Uncle should not be able to defeat the Chiba army. This kind of thing did not make sense at all. In the beginning, Junior Martial Uncle had offended so many masters with his vicious tongue. Should he and Fang Haohan run away tomorrow or not? Because he was thinking about this problem, he forgot to take the opportunity to deal a harsh blow to Qin Yin. Therefore, it could be proven that he was truly a fool. Qin Yin only snapped out of his daze when he saw Qinya Haowu crawling up from the ground and about to jump off the cliff. Using his full speed, he grabbed Qinya Haowu, who was about to fall from the sky, and pulled him back. Before Qinya Haowu could resist, he slapped the back of his neck, and Qinya Haowu fainted again without a sound. They cooperated very well. To be honest, Fang Yen was also a little surprised. He knew that he was going to face a tough battle, and he had indeed been on the verge of death countless times. However, the sudden appearance of this state and the mutated Taiji heart made him completely unable to control it. In other words, he didn't even know if such a state would appear again in the future. Of course, even though he was confused, he still had to grasp the key point at the crucial moment. He knew what he should do and what he shouldn't do. What he should do was not to stand there in a daze, but to jump off the cliff with Qinya Haowu. Fang Yen also jumped off. Phoenix said to Qinya Haowu, who was still trying to crawl up from the ground, "Don't worry, your Mr. Fang jumped down to save your father." Qinya Haowu looked over in surprise, and indeed, she saw her Mr. Fang jumping off the cliff. However, she didn't notice that when Phoenix said that, there was a trace of pity in her eyes. Not much, just a trace. Qinya Haowu's falling speed was not fast, and he was still thinking about using his body's strength to control the inertia of the falling object. In this aspect, he did very well. He moved his feet and released his energy, using it to increase his buoyancy. If he wore the wide-sleeved robe that had not been blown up, he would look like those immortals who flew in the wind in the valley. This action was really cool. Fang Yen fell very fast because he needed to be fast. Qinya Haowu was sent flying by Fang Yan's palm, which was a passive acceptance. As long as it was something that was passively accepted, everyone would be reluctant to do it. Qinya Haowu didn't want to fall to the bottom of the valley, so he wanted to use his personal cultivation strength and the saplings and vines on the cliff to jump back to the top of the mountain. As long as he was given a small leverage point, he could soar to the sky again. He stood in front of Fang Yen again. He still wanted to fight, and he didn't want to admit defeat. Fang Yen thought the same. He also wanted to fight, and he didn't think that Qinya Haowu had lost. As long as he was alive, he wouldn't lose. It wasn't easy for him to defeat him. If he didn't take the opportunity to kill him, what if he challenged him again after he recovered? What if he shamelessly challenged Fong Yingying and Fong Haohan? What if he challenged Yi Gentle, that wild woman? Fight. Keep fighting. I won't stop until I kill him. The matter was in free fall, and Fong Yan himself used the 1,000 caddies fall in this movement. Fong Yan's body fell at a high speed, like a big cannonball shot by someone from the top of the mountain. He landed on the top of Qian Yahaowu's head and kicked at the top of his skull. If this kick landed, Qian Yahaowu's head would be stomped into his stomach. Qian Yahaowu waved his arm, and his body moved inward by 10 feet. It was only because of this subtle balance that Fong Yan's heavy body fell below him. Qian Yahaowu laughed wildly and shouted, "You came at the right time. I was worried that there was no one to accompany me on the long mountain road. It's too lonely to be alone." As he spoke, he had already kicked 32 times at Fong Yan's head, face, and spine. He exerted his strength very well. Even though he was doing gravitational movements, he still managed to keep his body above Fong Yan's head. Fong Yan kept using his hands to parry, and it was very difficult for him to avoid Qian Yahaowu's killing moves. Crack! An extended sapling was knocked down by Fong Yan's body. It was at the moment when his back touched the sapling that Fong Yan's body had already sensed it. He straightened his body and rushed up again with the force of the collision. This was the realm of masters. As long as they were given a drop of water, they could turn it into a whole ocean. As long as they were still breathing, they might have the opportunity to kill your whole family. Fong Yan punched out with a single fist, just like Ultraman's cold and aloof appearance when he was summoned. The difference was that one was charging from the sky to the ground, while the other was charging from midair to the sky. Qian Yahaowu's right foot straightened and stabbed toward Fong Yan's fist like a sharp sword. He wanted to cut off Fong Yan's fist and split his whole body in half from top to bottom. Don't be fooled by the fact that he was only using one leg. That leg was his invincible sword. Boom! Fong Yan threw out a punch and forcefully hit the tip of the foot that Fong Yan had stretched out. Qian Yahaowu's foot shrank, and the shoe on his foot suddenly disappeared. Before he could fully display his sword energy, Fong Yan had already hit him with all his strength. Qian Yahaowu's body also rose, but he was hit by Fong Yan. He stretched out his hand, and a handful of leaves fell into his palm. With a flick of his finger, a leaf silently pierced toward the center of Fong Yan's eyebrows. Flying flowers and leaves could hurt people. This was the strength of Qian Yahaowu. It was the same principle as when Fong Yan penetrated the paper with his internal force and disfigured the willow tree. Fong Yan punched out and sent the leaf flying. Qian Yahaowu flicked out 2 more leaves in a row. After they were sent flying by Fong Yan, the leaves suddenly rained down on Fong Yan. In the hands of Qian Yahaowu, each leaf was a small sword. He used these countless small swords to form a sword formation and covered the top of Fong Yan's head. People had very little space to move in the air. The way up was blocked by the sword formation. If he dived down, he would be chased by these Yi Jian, which had been penetrated by the fierce energy. Even if Fong Yan fell to the bottom, these Yi Jian would not necessarily lose all their aggressiveness and would still cause fatal damage to Fong Yan. This was Qian Yahaowu, the Japanese sword god who could not be underestimated at any time. Fong Yan was really angry. He knew it. He knew that this old guy was not a good guy. You have already failed and been thrown off the cliff. Do you still want to be so powerful? Do you still want to create so much trouble for people? It was so late now, and the audience was tired of watching. The ultimate move should have been used up. Can't you just obediently let me kill you? Do you have any professional ethics? Do you have any competitive spirit? What kind of match would go on and on like this? Fong Yan felt that he had to use his ultimate move and secret weapon. This old guy's spirit of resistance was too strong. He suddenly exerted force, and the pants on his lower body were shaken off by him. Hiss! When the pants flew off his body, there was a loud sound of cloth ripping. He grabbed the pants that could only be called cloth that was about to be blown away by the mountain wind and waved it at the small leaf sword that was coming toward his head. Clap, 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 clap. The pants that were penetrated by true qi and the leaves that were penetrated by sword qi collided with each other, making continuous sounds. If you were lucky enough to see this scene from a distance, You would be surprised to see a naked guy grabbing something and attacking another guy with his upper body bare. The naked guy ran fast, and the naked guy chased even faster. Their fight looked very fierce and ambiguous. If they were not in love, they would never do such a thing. When Fang Yen pulled up his pants and slapped all the Yi Jian away, he also felt a little sad. Damn it, I didn't shake it well just now, and my underwear was also shaken off. Chapter 276. Everything on TV was a lie. This was Fang Yan's profound experience. In the past, when he watched TV, once the hero transformed into Super Saiyan, he would clench his fists and shout, and with a strong shake of his body, his coat and pants would fly off. Only a pair of sexy and delicate boxer briefs were left on his body. In fact, that was not the case at all. Think about it, when you used your strength to shake off your pants, didn't you first tear your underwear? If the underwear didn't tear, how could your body's ki blow up the clothes outside the underwear? I've only heard of hitting a cow across a mountain, but I've never heard of hitting long pants with underwear, right? So, you can shake off your coat, but it's very unrealistic to want to shake off your pants and keep your underwear. It was also Fang Yan's first time doing this kind of thing, and he didn't have much experience, so the price he paid was heavy. Originally, the audience on the viewing platform couldn't see the battle on the top of the mountain. Even if they used binoculars, they could only occasionally see one or two figures. When Fang Yen and Chiba Hiroto were fighting, they wouldn't deliberately run to the edge of the cliff to let them see a few more glances. How could a guy who didn't buy a ticket enjoy such VIP benefits? However, Fang Yen and Chiba Hiroto were fighting naked on the edge of the mountain, which was a feast for the eyes of the guys who were anxiously watching with binoculars. A fatso with a cigarette in his mouth widened his eyes, raised his binoculars and said, "Damn, the fight is 2F*King intense, even their clothes are off." The senior Fujoshi next to him snatched away the binoculars of Fatso's boyfriend, raised it to look at the valley, and her whole body began to tremble with excitement. "They really beat their clothes off, they really beat their clothes off. The one in the back took off his pants and I can see his butt. His figure is not bad. Do you think the two of them are having an affair?" The love between the God of Swords and the Grandmaster of Tai Chi, just thinking about it makes me so excited. There were even more direct women who waved their fists and shouted, "Together, together, together." Many years later, when Fang Yinging told his son about the battle between the king of Taiji, Fang Yen, and the Japanese sword god, Chiba Hashirama, he would still describe it in a heavy and hoarse voice. "It was a tough fight, your grandmaster's clothes were all gone." But when you say this, can you not look so wretched and smile so lewdly? You'll give the kids bad associations, okay? Otherwise, why would your fat son anxiously ask whether Grandmaster and that Japanese sword god lived happily ever after you finish telling the story? Your son has become like this, and as a father, you have to take full responsibility, okay? Of course, Fang Yen didn't have the time to think about how much trouble exposing his butt would bring to his life. He was working hard, strenuously, fiercely, and relentlessly attacking the Thousand Leaves military department. Bang! Chiba Hashirama's body rose rapidly, and he jumped high to the top of the mountain with the help of a protruding boulder. Fang Yen also jumped high into the sky in a super cool posture. When he saw Yi Wen, Phoenix Chiba Sun, and countless people in the dark staring at his lower body, he couldn't help but lower his head. Damn, it's so embarrassing. There's a reaction. Fang Yen consecutively used dozens of thousand gene weight on himself, adding up to several tens of thousands of gene. Only then did he manage to press his body down with lightning speed. So, in the eyes of the people on the mountain top, this was the scene. The naked Fang Yen jumped up from the valley like a monkey, and the naked Fang Yen jumped down like a monkey. Fang Yinging looked up at the starry sky, sighed softly and said, "Junior Marshal Uncle doesn't like women. Is the Fang family going to have no descendants?" Fang Haohan covered his butt nervously and said, "Junior Marshal Uncle peeped on me bathing. Junior Marshal Uncle took me to Shihizi Reservoir to catch crayfish, and he tricked me into taking off all my clothes. I was still young at that time, and I didn't have any awareness of defense." Fang Yinging and Fang Haohan looked at each other, and they saw despair and sadness in each other's eyes. Their virginity had long been tarnished, and they could no longer be pure and beautiful men. When Fang Yen jumped up again, he had a skirt around his waist. It was the pants he used to swing the leaf sword, and he had an idea to change it into this. Of course, because he used too much force when he took off his pants, his clothes were already torn to pieces, so his skirt looked like a tattered tassel skirt, full of passion and exotic charm. When Fang Yen punched Chiba Hiroshi, his skirt would be lifted up high, revealing his sexy and plump buttocks. When Fang Yen quickly rushed towards Chiba Hiroshi, his skirt would be blown up by the wind, revealing his sexy and straight black hairy thighs. When Fang Yen kicked Chiba Hiroshi, his skirt would also be lifted up by the whistling night wind, revealing, holy shit, he still has a reaction. Every attack represented another exposure. This scene was so beautiful that many people didn't dare to look at it for too long. Of course, Fang Yan's sacrifice was also effective. Boom! He punched Chiba Hiroshi and sent him flying. He slapped Chiba Hiroshi until he vomited blood. Dong! He was kicked in the crotch by Chiba Hiroshi. Fang Yen sucked in a breath of cold air in pain. This old man had planned for so long just for this attack, right? When Chiba Hiroshi was once again knocked to the ground by Fang Yen and his body hit the big stone, he completely lost the interest and motivation to fight. He leaned against the rock and looked at Fang Yen, who was standing in front of him, and said, "You have won this battle." "I know." Fang Yen nodded and said, "Can you stand up and let's fight for a while? 10 minutes? 5 minutes is fine. How about 3 minutes? Believe me, I'm very fast. Come, let me help you up." Chiba Hiroshi looked at Fang Yen with a puzzled look and said, "You have already won. I admit defeat in public, and your name will spread to Huaxia, Japan, and even the entire Asian martial arts world. Why do you still want to fight?" Fang Yen was very angry and said, "I don't want to fight, but can I not fight? If you lie here and don't move, how can I slap you to death? Get up and let's fight again. You pretend to punch me, and then I will smash your head with one punch." Chiba Hiroshi smiled silently and said, "You want to kill me? Isn't that obvious?" Fang Yen scolded. "You see that I'm young, promising, and knowledgeable, so you want to kill me to get rid of a terrifying and dangerous opponent for the Japanese. You have lived for so many years, eaten and drank, and played with everything you want. Not counting the illegitimate children, you even have 2 children. Can't you let me kill you with one slap? You're better than me at this point." Chiba Hiroshi said, "I wanted to kill you, and I showed my murderous intent from the beginning. You wanted to kill me, and you only showed a little bit of murderous intent now. Bullsh asterisk T murderous intent. I just wanted to save my life from the beginning, okay? I only wanted to defeat you after I saved my life, okay? I only wanted to kill you after I defeated you, okay? You wanted to kill me from the beginning, but I went through a complicated mental journey and emotional change. You won't understand even if I tell you. Anyway, you have to stand up immediately and let me slap you to death." Chiba Hiroshi laughed wildly. He laughed until his voice was hoarse and he couldn't breathe. He clutched his chest and coughed violently, and bright red blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His internal organs had been injured by Fang Yen, and his body was severely damaged. Just now, when Fang Yen knocked him out of the canyon, he had already lost his fighting spirit. The reason why he still fought with Fang Yen for so long was that he was unwilling to accept defeat. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept being defeated by a young man from Huaxia. In other words, his road to conquering Huaxia had ended here. But as soon as he took a step forward, his foot was chopped off. Such an encounter made people feel extremely sad and sad. I understand. I understand." Chiba Hiroshi laughed until tears came out of his eyes. He looked at Fang Yen and said, "You are really an interesting person. Only such a person can understand the real martial arts. Martial arts is the human nature. As long as people live with spirit, they can reach the peak of martial arts. Until now, I didn't understand. I didn't know what my biggest flaw was. I focused on comprehending the sword and didn't care about the world, but it also meant that I closed the door to myself and the world. Only by entering the world can I understand the world. Only by understanding the world can I feel the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the sword. My emotions are not lacking in ruthlessness or lightness, but they lack a sense of humanity. I didn't lose unjustly, I didn't lose unjustly. The old guy lay there and talked for a long time. Fang Yen was not willing to listen to him anymore. He stood in front of Chiba Hiroshi with his hands on his waist and bare upper body and thighs. He said impatiently, "Are you going to get up or not? Don't think that I can't kill you because you are like this. I am a cruel and merciless guy. If you don't believe me, you can ask around. Children can stop crying at night just by mentioning my name." Chiba Hiroshi flicked his finger, and a small stone flew toward Fang Yan's crotch. Crack. With the sound of cloth ripping, the small cloth skirt around Fang Huo's waist came off and was blown away by the wind. Fang Yen stood where he was for a few seconds, and then he grinned. "You started it this time." Fang Yen dashed forward with his bare buttocks. He punched and kicked Chiba Shinobu, who was lying on the ground. Cloud-piercing palm, cloud-collapsing fist, monkey-plucking peach, black tiger gouging heart, beast somersault 360 degrees Tokyo Tower. Chapter 277. Some people say that happiness is not because you get too much, but because you care too little. Fang Yen had long wanted to drag the guy who said this out and beat him up. It was easy to say, but if someone took off your pants and exposed your butt in front of everyone, would you not care and pretend that nothing had happened? I hate it when people act cheap. Fang Yen felt someone patting his butt. Oh, it was the wind. Fang Yen felt someone pulling his arm. He turned around abruptly and saw Chiba Kaori standing timidly behind him. She was helpless and pitiful. She said, "Mr. Fang, please, don't beat my father anymore, okay?" Fang Yen felt a headache coming on. When men were fighting, women should not be watching at the scene, should they? He kicked Chiba Kaori and said, "Your father wanted to kill me, so it's natural for me to kill him now. Am I right?" Chiba Kaori nodded. "But he has already lost. He has already admitted defeat to you. Mr. Fang, my father is a proud man like you. He would rather die than admit defeat. However, he admitted defeat to you. Can you let him go? Don't humiliate him like this anymore. Although he was defeated by you, please give him a little bit of a martial artist's dignity. All martial artists should be respected by others. Isn't that the case? You said in class that anyone who becomes the most powerful person in his own field and makes a special contribution should be respected by others, even if that person is a thief." Fang Yen could not help but nod and said, "You're right. I am indeed an iron-blooded man who would rather die than admit defeat. Otherwise, I wouldn't have accepted your father's challenge. I can see that your father is like me. No, he seems to have more backbone than me." Chiba Kaori was overjoyed and said, "Mr. Fang, you agree to let my father go?" "I'm going to kill him and let him have what he wants," Fang Yen said firmly. "I know what people like us really need." As he spoke, he slashed his saber at Chiba's neck. Thump. Chiba Sun threw herself onto her father and used her frail body to shield Fang Yen. She cried, "Mr. Fang, I beg you, let him go. He's just a pitiful old man who failed. He can't go back. He'll only be criticized and mocked by countless people when he returns. He has nothing left. He can't die because he's the husband of a woman and the father of 2 children. Mr. Fang, I know you're a kind-hearted man. You've never taken the initiative to hurt anyone. You've always been passively accepting challenges from others. You're refined, knowledgeable, and have a strong patriotism. In fact, you and my father are the same kind of person." Chiba Sun turned to look at Fang Yen and begged, "Mr. Fang, please have pity on this old man. Have pity on his daughter. Let him go, please?" Chiba Hyunbu's face was swollen and he was covered in blood. He didn't look like the god of swords anymore. However, he still maintained a calm and peaceful attitude. He reached out to stroke his daughter's hair and said with a smile, "Chiba Sun, thank you for everything you've done for me. This is the first time you've seen me fight with someone and I've lost. As your father, I feel so ashamed." "No, father, you're not ashamed. Not at all," Chiba Sun said as she hugged Chiba Hyunbu. "In my heart, you're not only the Japanese god of swords, but also my idol. As a father, I know you're the best father in the world. You've never criticized me or forced me to do anything. You've given me all your gentleness and love. It's the happiest thing in my life to be your daughter. Silly child, it's because you're my daughter, Chiba Hyunbu said with a smile. He twitched the corner of his mouth, and a large pool of blood flowed out. Fang Yen watched the scene quietly. He really couldn't bring himself to do it. Just as Chiba Sun said, to the former Japanese god of swords, Chiba Hyunbu, begging for mercy was more difficult than dying in battle. He gave up on the competition and lay there, allowing people to beat and scold him. In fact, he was already prepared to die. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown that pebble at Fang Yan's fringed underwear. It was reasonable for Fang Yan to beat him to death for such a provocation. Even the old guys who were watching from the sidelines wouldn't say anything because it was natural for martial artists to fight back when they were attacked. However, Chiba Sun begged for mercy on his father's behalf, which made him feel worse than slapping Chiba Hyunbu dozens of times in public. It was a great humiliation for the Japanese god of swords to rely on his daughter to save his life. However, even so, he didn't reprimand Chiba Sun or thank her for what she did. He only regretted that he couldn't win the competition in front of his daughter. He was the sword god of success, and he was also success's father. Seeing that Fang Yen wasn't willing to agree, Chiba Hyunbu knelt in front of Fang Yen and hugged his calf. Mr. Fang, please let him go this time, okay? I'll agree to any condition you want. I know you're angry and I know you're angry. Please take it out on me. I'm his daughter, and I'm willing to take all the revenge for him. Fang Yen looked at Chiba Sun and asked, if I was defeated by your father, would you plead for me? Yes, Chiba Sun answered without hesitation. I was kidnapped by a sister on my way here. She said that if you're in danger, I won't be able to keep my life. I'm happy to hear that, and I'm happy to be kidnapped by her. Seeing Phoenix walking over, Fang Yen knew that she wasn't lying. He looked at Chiba Hyunbu, who was lying on the ground, and said, if I fail and plead for you, would you let me go? You know the answer, Chiba Hyunbu said. Why do you need to ask others? I know the answer, Fang Yen said. I know you won't let me go. You'll definitely swing your sword and kill me. You see, this kind of thing is really difficult. If I let you go, it won't be fair to me. If I kill you, it'll seem like I'm heartless. Why don't you kill yourself? Chiba Hyunbo laughed and said, I won't kill myself. How shameless. Fang Yen was so angry that he was about to stomp his feet. Bullsh asterisk T Japanese god of swords. He's completely shameless. How could someone like him become a grandmaster? He couldn't imagine how he would be worshipped by countless people in the future. Slapped. Fang Yan's but was slapped by someone. Phoenix stood behind him and said, are you an exhibitionist? How long are you going to stand here with your butt bare? Those seniors in the dark are here to watch you fight with the Japanese god of swords, not to see you show off your body. I'm not doing it for them to see, Fang Yen said embarrassedly. I'm mainly doing it for you, Fang Ying. Fang Ying responded and trotted to Fang Yen. Junior martial uncle, I knew you would win. Find me my clothes, Fang Yen interrupted his flattery and said. On the eve of the battle, he took off a black robe. Fang Ying turned around and ran. He really did find the black robe that was still intact. Give me the clothes. Phoenix reached out to take it. Give me the clothes. An even colder voice came from behind. Fang Yingxiong looked at Phoenix, who was in front of him, and then at Yi Ro, who was walking over from behind. His fat face turned bitter, and he said awkwardly, both of you want it. Who should I give it to? Give it to me. Phoenix and Yi Ro shouted at the same time. Phoenix saw Yi Ro, and Yi Ro naturally saw Phoenix. The two women's eyes met, and there was a fierce electric current between them. They were old acquaintances, but they didn't have a good relationship. In terms of feelings, Fang Yen and Phoenix had a better relationship. Because every time Fang Yen was beaten like a dog by Yi Ro, he would run to Phoenix for comfort. Fang Ying looked at Fang Yen for help, but Fang Yen pretended not to see it. He stared at Chiba and said, brother, do me a favor and stab yourself, okay? Who doesn't encounter difficulties in the martial arts world? Next time you are in trouble, I can help you. Fang Ying threw the clothes into the air and shouted, whoever grabs it gets it, slap. Fang Yingxiong was kicked in the face. The kick made him dizzy and confused. He felt like he was about to fall to the ground. Bang! He was kicked in the stomach, and his body rolled on the ground like a ball. Phoenix sneered and said, "I told you to give it to me, so give it to me. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Don't play tricks with me. You're courting death," Yi Rou said in an unfriendly tone. Fang Haohan was so scared that he trembled all over. He wanted to hide his tall body in the crack of the stone. The black robe fell to the ground, but Phoenix and Yi Rou were unwilling to bend down to pick it up. How could such a cold woman do such a thing? Fang Yen looked at Phoenix and Yi Rou, sighed and shouted, "Fang Haohan." No one answered. Fang Haohan lay next to Fang Yingying, pretending to be dead. His face was still smeared with the blood he borrowed from Fang Yingying's face. Fang Yen looked at Phoenix and Yi Rou and said, "Can you help me pick up the clothes?" Neither Phoenix nor Yi Rou answered. Chiba Kori looked up at Fang Yen, then at Phoenix and Yi Rou. She hurried to pick up the black robe on the ground and brought it to Fang Yen. Fang Yen covered himself with the black robe and fastened the belt. He immediately felt a sense of security. Standing naked in front of so many people, he was really a little uncomfortable. Fang Yen looked down at Chiba Kori and said, "What should I do with you?" Chiba Kori's eyes were suddenly filled with anger. He jumped up and threw himself at Fang Yen. Fang Yen punched and sent Chiba Kori flying. At the same time, a row of people in black who could fly suddenly appeared in the sky above the valley. They raised their biological guns and shot at Fang Yen. Boom! A large crater appeared where Fang Yen had been standing. Chapter 278. The attack was too sudden, and the enemy's weapons were too powerful. They wore flight suits and floated in the air, appearing in the sky above the Grand Canyon. They were silent, and it was impossible to guard against them. What was more frightening was their weapons, which looked like small submachine guns. A silver light bullet was shot towards Fang Yen. When the light bullet hit the hard rock, it actually smashed a huge hole in the rock. If someone were to stand there, they would probably shatter into pieces just like those stones. Not even their dregs could be found. These people came and went like ghosts. They were equipped with advanced equipment, and they used a killer move as soon as they appeared. This made Fang Yen extremely angry, because from the weapons they used and the way they did things, he could determine the enemy's identity, the military armory. Only the military armory could do something like this. Were these bastards going to fight to the death with him? I eliminated evil for the people, won glory for the country, and look so cute. What right do you have to do this to me? Before Fang Yen could roar in anger, the second shell flew towards him. Fang Yen quickly rolled and ran forward with all his might. Because the area of effect of the bomb was too large, and after the explosion, there would be green corrosive substances splashing everywhere. If he ran a little slower, it might blow off a leg and tear off a piece of skin. Fang Yen had just experienced a fierce battle. He was exhausted and seriously injured. He really couldn't take such a heavy injury. Most importantly, these people who used Shadan were not stupid at all. On the contrary, they were quite smart. More than a dozen people in black lined up in the sky, each holding a black submachine gun and shooting towards the top of One Sword Peak. They cooperated well, and the shooting frequency was also carefully planned. If the top of One Sword Peak was described as a large square array, then 2 black-clothed men would shoot the silver bullets at the first square, and then the other 2 black-clothed men would shoot the silver bullets at the second square. The third and fourth groups would do the same. Each square was the maximum explosion range of the bomb. When the first group finished shooting, the second group would take over, the third group would be responsible for reloading, the fourth group would shoot without mistakes, and the fifth group would shoot accurately. Their artillery fire blocked the entire One Sword Peak. Not even a mouse could escape. This was an extermination operation to make Fang Yen and everyone on One Sword Peak stay. Boom, boom, boom. The sounds of explosions rang out incessantly. After a round of artillery fire, the summit of the One Sword Peak was blasted into countless craters. It was like the surface of the moon photographed by a satellite. When the first shell was about to hit the ground, Fang Yen sent Chiba Hajime flying. Chiba Hajime was quickly carried away by Phoenix. This bandit was quite attentive to his hostage. It had always been the gangsters who let the hostages die for them. This was the first time he had seen a gangster risk his life to save a hostage. The two of them had run into the shadows, but it wasn't safe there either. Yi Gentle picked up the stone and threw it at the black figure in the sky. If it was someone else, it wouldn't be a big deal if they smashed it. Trying to use a small stone to shoot down an expert with an aircraft in the air was undoubtedly a dream. However, if the person who threw the stone was Yi Ro, the situation would be different. Yi Ro attacked with hatred. Her strength was astonishing. In her hands, a stone thrown out was no different from a shell shot by the men in black with a submachine gun. It was just that there were no explosions or special effects. Because she was too fast and the stone was flying too fast, no one could hear the sound of the stone flying until it reached the target. Bang! The stone hit the black-clothed man's body. The man screamed and died tragically. There was a big hole in his chest, which was wearing a special bulletproof vest, and the bones in his chest were all broken. The submachine gun in the hands of the man in black stopped firing. His body was carried by the aircraft and drifted in the sky like a ghost without a master. Everyone, disperse and be careful. Seeing that one of his team members was killed by a stone, the captain of the flight team warned in a low voice and gave the order. The black-clothed men immediately broke up their formation and headed towards the summit of One Sword Peak in pairs. With another round of artillery fire, they would be able to blast the entire One Sword Peak into a wasteland. After Yi Ro threw the first stone, she didn't wait for its final result. When the man in black screamed before he died, she had already picked up 2 more stones and threw them at the other 2 men in black in the air. Burst fire. Bang. Only one sound was made, but 2 people were hit at the same time. One's head was smashed by the stone, and blood splattered everywhere. The other one was even more unlucky. His armory was hit by the stone. Boom. The body of the man in black exploded in the air. Countless pieces of flesh and blood flew in the air. The captain of the flight team quickly dodged, but his back was still hit by something. His back was the flight bag of the aircraft, so it helped him block some of the attacks. However, this still made the captain furious. He shouted, "Kill them all, kill them all." As he spoke, he held the submachine gun and fired at Yi Ro's position. He saw how powerful Yi Ro was and knew that she was the culprit who caused them to lose 3 of their fighters. In the blink of an eye, they lost 3 trained pilots. This made him feel like his heart was bleeding. He only had these few good seeds, so he couldn't give them up so easily. Otherwise, his position as the captain would be over, and he would be dead when he returned. Hearing the captain's angry roar, the other team members desperately rushed to the top of the mountain. Idiot! Every time a team member died, a red star would be destroyed on their silver shield. This was just the beginning, and they had already destroyed 3 red stars. This meant that 3 of their team members had left the team forever. They were both angry and afraid. No one wanted to be the next unlucky person. If they didn't want to be killed, they could only kill. If they ruthlessly killed the other party and completed the mission as quickly as before, they would be safe. Rumble, rumble, gunfire rained down, and the rumbling sound was endless. On the viewing platform, the audience who didn't know what was going on looked at the top of the mountain in confusion and said, "What's going on? Why do I hear thunder?" It's not thunder, it's Tai Chi Master Fang Yen and the Japanese sword god sparring. They are using their ultimate moves at the same time. One is using the Tai Chi turtle wave technique, the other is using the Japanese ninja technique. There's someone in the sky, look, there's someone in the sky. Lao Jun Pavilion. Jiang Zhulu raised his binoculars and looked, and his expression became ferocious. He looked at Lu Qingming and Lan Shanggu who were sitting in front of him and said, "Brothers, looks like we have to leave first." "What's going on?" Lan Shanggu took Jiang Zhulio's binoculars and looked, then said, "Someone wants to kill us all? Don't tell me they want to put shit on us 3 brothers? What a good move." Jiang Zhulu smiled and said, "Those people are so ruthless, we can't stay and clean up their mess." Lu Qingming also took the binoculars. This was the first time he looked at the top of the mountain with binoculars. After a few glances, he said, "Who are those people? They're so ruthless. They didn't just want to kill Fang Yen, right? But, since it's like this, it's probably too late for us to leave now, right? Who knew this would happen? Lan Shanggu smiled bitterly. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have come. Jiang Zhulu looked at Lan Shanggu with a smile and said, Brother Shanggu, if Fang Yen really couldn't go back today, wouldn't it be easier for you to do business? Lu Chaoga isn't an easy person to negotiate with. Lan Shanggu shook his head and said, If Fang Yen died, Lu Chaoga would be a toothless tiger. Other than having a fierce temper, what's the difference between him and a big cat? Jiang Zhulu smiled and said, Lan Shanggu looked at Jiang Zhulu and said, Even if Fang Yen can't go back tonight, isn't there an even bigger tiger standing behind Lu Chaoga? That tiger is a real tiger. That tiger is too far away from us. Unless Lu Chaoga moves his company to Beijing, as long as he stays in Huaqing, he can forget about leaving us brothers to get rich. This is the rule, no one can come. Jiang Zhulu, Lu Qingming, and Lan Shanggu looked at each other and laughed. A new alliance of benefits was formed. At the very least, at this moment, everyone present seemed sincere enough. If something happened to Fang Yen, Jiang Zhulu, Lan Shanggu, and Lu Qingming would all be suspects. If Fang Yen were to die, it would be the end of everything. Other than Fang Yen himself, no one else would come to seek justice for the group of dead people on the mountaintop. However, if Fang Yen didn't die, then things would be even worse. Who would Fang Yen suspect? They wanted to leave, but they couldn't. If they left in a hurry, wouldn't it make people suspect that they had a guilty conscience? Smart people like to complicate things, so what they had to do was to simplify things as much as possible. Jiang Zhulu clicked his tongue and said with some pity, This fireworks show is even more exciting than the battle just now. It's a pity that there's no wine to accompany the meal. What a pity! Jiang Zhulu had already finished all the wine he brought, and the show was over. It was time to leave, but he didn't think that there would be another competition now. Clearly, he wasn't satisfied. Lu Qingming thoughtfully looked at the sky above his head and said, 9 out of 10 things don't go as one wishes. Who can be perfect? I always feel that we have enough. If we are too greedy, we will be punished by heaven. Look, isn't there a perfect example above us? Chapter 279. The top of One Sword Peak became hell on earth. After numerous rounds of indiscriminate gunfire, as well as the green liquid splashing all over the place, there wasn't a single place left intact on the mountaintop. Rocks were broken, trees were burnt, weeds were blackened, insects and birds were all dead. From above, there weren't any signs of life at all. Some of the dried wood was being burned, letting out crackling noises. This was the only sound at the top of One Sword Peak. Captain, are they all dead? A team member asked through their helmet communicator. They originally only wanted to kill Fang Yen alone, but his resistance was so intense that they were afraid of being crushed to death by the rocks, so they madly fired at the top of One Sword Peak until they emptied all their weapons. They had lost their minds just now. According to their training, they weren't allowed to use up any more weapons after killing their target. They were supposed to keep at least 20% of their weapons for emergencies. This was the first time they'd ever done something like flattening an entire mountain in one go. Who told them to face a bunch of freaks that could fly around and shoot down airplanes with rocks? It should be, dash. The captain cautiously scanned his surroundings, then finally made his decision and said, They're all dead. The captain gestured with his hand and ordered, Retreat. The team members received their orders and prepared to dive down. At this point, something unexpected happened. A rock whistled towards the back of a black-clothed pilot. The pilot was shocked and raised his shield to block it. Clang! With a dull thud, the black-clothed pilot and his shield were both sent flying by the rock. It wasn't until he flipped a few times in the air that he screamed in pain and fell down into the abyss. Hurry up and retreat, the captain issued an emergency order. There's clearly no one here, so why are there still rocks flying towards them? Following that, a catastrophic scene unfolded. Dozens of rocks were flying towards them, not just rocks, but also knives, iron lotus seeds, leaves, iron thorns, all sorts of strange objects were flying towards them. Wait a minute, what's with that string of prayer beads? Captain, my aircraft was damaged, dash, Retreat, there's a lot of them, I need to replenish my weapons, I need to replenish my weapons, the team members screamed out in pain. There were constantly members who were shot down or killed by the flying objects. They had no weapons to fight back. They wanted to escape, but the stones and hidden weapons followed them. The captain opened his mouth and was about to issue a new order when he suddenly found a rope around his neck. Panicking, he piloted the aircraft and prepared to escape. As soon as the aircraft flew over the canyon, a woman in black jumped up with a whoosh. She stepped on her shoulders like a heroine who was riding a flying beast to fight with humans. Yi Wen's short hair danced in the wind. She tied the whip around the captain's neck, and with a slight lift of the whip, the captain had to change direction according to her wishes. The captain felt extremely humiliated, but the rope was so tight that he couldn't breathe, let alone make a forceful counterattack. He took off his leather gloves and quietly reached into his pocket. There was still the last silver bullet. The reason why he kept it was to use it to perish together with the enemy. Now it really came in handy. His arm went numb, and the silver bullet was in the hands of that hateful woman. Yi Wen squatted on the aircraft behind the captain, holding the silver bullet, and asked, "As long as you press this red button, the bomb will explode. Is that right?" The captain's eyes were filled with fear, but he was unwilling to answer Yi Wen. Yi Wen took off the captain's helmet and said, "Let's do an experiment." She pressed the red button and stuffed the silver bullet into the captain's mouth. The rope around his neck disappeared, and the captain felt a lot more relaxed. Even his breathing became normal. He suddenly felt a little hot in his mouth, as if his mouth was getting bigger and bigger. "Huh? Isn't that my chin?" Boom! The silver bullet exploded in the captain's mouth. The exploded body and the aircraft he was carrying turned into pieces. The entire flying team was annihilated. Some people weren't weak, but they were unlucky. They allowed Fang Yen to fight to the death with the Japanese sword god, Chiba Toyotomi. If Chiba Toyotomi killed Fang Yen, they would retreat quietly as if they had never appeared. If Chiba was injured by Fang Yen or both sides were injured, they would kill and annihilate them when they were at their weakest and most fatigued. What other heaven-defying things could these two patients do? With the help of the most advanced aircraft, they were equipped with the most lethal firearms. With a round of artillery bombardment, even a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal would be smashed into pieces by them. However, they didn't expect that because of the duel between Fang Yen and Chiba, some Lingnan masters and hermits who cultivated nearby all came to watch. There were so many masters on Solitary Sword Peak that it was enough to hold a martial arts circle convention. They used submachine guns to kill Fang Yen, which was equivalent to killing all those masters at the same time. These masters were more arrogant and unruly than the other. How could they be willing to be bullied for no reason? It was only natural for them to fight back when they got the chance. Therefore, the people in the arsenal and the people behind them didn't expect that they would offend such a group of lunatics and get such a miserable result. God will take care of those who are despicable, Fang Yen thought happily in his heart. If they weren't so despicable, they could still be good friends. At this time, all kinds of strange people crawled out from all kinds of unexpected places. There was a bald monk, a Taoist priest in a layman's robe, a one-eared fatso, a handsome middle-aged man in a black robe, and a charming girl. Yi Gentle was fine, and so were Phoenix and Chiba Sun. Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan also crawled out from the corner, but they looked too disheveled. Of course, there were so many masters present that all looked disheveled. Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan trotted over and asked with concern, "Junior Martial Uncle, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Fang Yen said with a smile. "I didn't even have time to make a move before those guys were all killed," Fang Haohan said with a smile. They brought this upon themselves. "Good people like us will naturally be blessed by God and live a peaceful life," Fang Yingying said with a proud smile. Chiba Sun looked around for her father. Phoenix walked over and said, "These people had a good idea. Unfortunately, their luck wasn't that good. It's fine if they wanted to kill me, but they even bullied my idol seniors. This is too much," Fang Yen shouted with a face full of anger. "Arsenal, I will not live under the same sky as you guys. If I don't take revenge, I'm not a man." Phoenix glanced at Fang Yen and said, "All right, Stop pretending to be angry. You're so happy that you can't even close your mouth, right? Didn't you shout out the name of the arsenal to let those old guys who were bullied hold a grudge against them? Now you've achieved your goal, haven't you? Fang Yen secretly glanced around and whispered to Phoenix, "Don't tell anyone. That arsenal is too powerful, I can't deal with it alone. I have no reason not to do it if I can make a few enemies for them. Besides, they really want to kill everyone on the top of this mountain. I'm not lying. I won't say that. As for whether others will say it or not, I don't know. They have a strong sense of justice." Phoenix glanced at Yi Ro, who was standing at the side, and sneered. "I don't talk nonsense with people." Yi Ro looked at Phoenix's provocative eyes. "If I'm not satisfied with someone, I'll just beat them up. What made you so arrogant that you think you're invincible? More and more people are defeated by me. Others might be afraid of you, Yi Ro, but I'm not. You're the #1 in Neijiang, aren't you just bragging? If you're not convinced, you can try. Anytime, I say." Fang Yen wanted to mediate. "Today is a big day, there's no need to be so contradictory, right?" "Shut up," Phoenix and Yi Ro shouted at the same time. Fang Yen looked up at the sky, a little helpless in his eyes. The bald monk spat at the sky, strode to Fang Yen and shouted, "Fang family's boy, eat my fist. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. I've long been annoyed by you." The Taoist priest dressed in layman's clothes walked up to Fang Yen and bowed with one hand clasped in front of him, saying, "I'm Qing Yun, Layman Weed's good-for-nothing disciple. Congratulations to Layman Fang for winning the first battle and defeating the Japanese sword god. Qing Yun has benefited a lot from today's battle, so I want to set a date with Layman Fang so that I can learn your godly skill. I'm Kai Zhonghong, the king of gossip who questioned why the Japanese sword god didn't challenge you. I originally planned to challenge him after the Japanese defeated you, but since you're the big winner of this match, I can only challenge you. Do you think we should continue fighting today, or should we set a date for another duel?" Kai Zhonghong, get lost, I've already booked. Seeing a group of experts clamoring for a duel with Fang Yen, Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan's expressions were a little awkward, and they couldn't help but want to stand further away from Fang Yen. Fang Yen held his head and shouted, "Ouch, I'm a little dizzy. Heroes, help me, I think I've lost too much blood, I'm a little anemic." Before Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan could escape, Fang Yan's body had already fallen into their arms. The two looked at each other, wanting to cry but having no tears. Chapter 280. When Fang Yen opened his eyes, he heard Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan chatting. "Junior Martial Uncle is indeed Junior Martial Uncle. He's even so professional at pretending to be dead. I can't help but admire him. He was afraid that he would be surrounded by those experts he offended on One Sword Peak and take revenge, so he pretended to be dead and hasn't woken up yet." This was Fang Yingying's voice. "That's right. If the two of us pretended to sleep for 1 or 2 hours at most, we'd be alive and kicking after everyone has left. How could we be like Junior Martial Uncle, who slept for 2 days and 2 nights and still isn't willing to wake up? Do you think Junior Martial Uncle really fainted at that time?" "I suspect that it was definitely fainting." This was Fang Haohan's voice. Fang Yen was shocked. He actually slept for 2 days? At that time, he just didn't want to accept the challenge from Gossip King Weed Hermit's disciple and the old monks group. Who would want to fight to the death with them for no reason? His occupation was a teacher, and his primary responsibility was to educate people. Fighting and killing was uncivilized. Isn't that obvious? I asked him if he had any problems before, and he said he was fine. Gossip King Weed Hermit's disciple fainted as soon as these people came to challenge him. It's obvious that he was acting. Fang Yingying said confidently. "It's not like you don't know Junior Martial Uncle's temperament. It's not like he's only done this kind of thing once or twice. But Junior Martial Uncle's injuries are really serious. Even Phoenix and Miss Yi said so. Tell me, does Phoenix like Junior Martial Uncle or not? These 2 days, she's been brewing medicine and wiping his body. She doesn't treat herself as an outsider at all. At that time on One Sword Peak, Miss Yi didn't want us to fight the Thousand Leaves army. She said that even if the Yi family's people were all dead, there's no need for us to die. Is there something we don't know? Yes, I've heard that too. Fang Yingying lowered his voice. I've been thinking about this sentence for the past 2 days. Say, could it be that Miss Yi is deeply in love with our junior martial uncle and has already regarded herself as the Fang family's daughter-in-law? Impossible, right? Junior martial uncle was beaten black and blue every time he fought with Miss Yi. He couldn't get out of bed for more than half a month. What kind of daughter-in-law would beat her future husband like that? Fang Yingying thought about it seriously and said, it's not impossible. Think about it, Miss Yi's skills are so good, and she has violent tendencies. Whenever she has something to do, she'll definitely find someone to beat up. Take the inner world for example, how many people can be a match for Miss Yi? Apart from junior martial uncle, who else could be worthy of her? A young disciple who could exchange blows with her and not be beaten to death by her? What was that sentence again? Flirting and scolding is love. Don't fight or scold. Maybe Miss Yi is in such a situation now. Fang Haohen sighed softly and said, does Miss Yi want a husband or a human punching bag? Junior martial uncle is so pitiful. Fang Yingying also sighed. Fang Yan listened and gritted his teeth. He asked fiercely, who are you saying is pitiful? Junior martial uncle is. Fang Yingying was about to answer, junior martial uncle is pitiful, when he suddenly felt something was wrong. His fat face instantly changed color. With red eyes, he rushed to Fang Yan on the bed and said excitedly, junior martial uncle is finally awake. That's great, that's really great. Junior martial uncle, do you know that you have been unconscious for 2 days? If you don't wake up, I don't know how to live. Fang Yan glanced at Fang Yingying with disdain and said, what do you mean by don't know how to live? Do you want to eat stewed noodles or lamb chop for your next meal? Junior martial uncle, you don't know. I haven't eaten much in the 2 days you were unconscious. Fang Haohen has no appetite like me. Look at how hungry he is. Fang Haohen nodded repeatedly. The skin on his cheeks was like bones. He looked really hungry. Fang Haohen won't be so hungry if he ate less glass shards. Fang Yan said snappily. Go get me a glass of water. Fang Yingying and Fang Haohen ran outside at the same time. Fang Yingying, stay. Fang Yan shouted. Fang Yingying's face was full of bitterness. When he turned around, his face was already full of smiles. He said, junior martial uncle, do you have something to ask me? What happened after I fainted? Fang Yan asked aloud. Junior martial uncle really doesn't know? Seeing that Fang Yan was about to lose his temper again, Fang Yingying quickly said, of course junior martial uncle doesn't know. Because junior martial uncle really fainted at that time. Seeing you faint, those people naturally dispersed. That's it? Fang Yan asked curiously. Not yet. Fang Yingying said. Fang Yingying, I don't have much strength right now. If you wait for me to ask any more questions, the first thing I do when I get up will be to beat you into meat paste. Fang Yingying was shocked and quickly said, after junior martial uncle fainted, Qingyun said goodbye and left. When he left, he said he would come back to fight with junior martial uncle in a month. That bald monk snatched the second place and said he would come back to fight with junior martial uncle 2 months later so that junior martial uncle could recuperate and not be slapped to death by him. Kai Zhonghong, the king of gossip, was ranked 3rd. He said don't lose to Qingyun and the bald monk. Otherwise, if he challenged you again, it would be a pity. Fang Yan's eyes were dull and said, I fainted, and they still didn't let me go. That's what I said at the time. Fang Yingying said. Seeing Fang Yan's eyes looking at him, Fang Yingying added, in the end, I was slapped on the head by that bald monk. I wasn't convinced. I originally wanted to fight him for 300 rounds. Stop bragging. You couldn't even last 3 rounds. Fang Yan said. Fang Yingying grinned and said, great minds think alike. When I saw that I couldn't beat him, I didn't take the initiative to hit him. Can someone like you be considered a hero? My name is Hero. Fang Haohen brought the water over. After drinking a large cup of warm water, Fang Yan felt much better. He asked Fang Yingying and Fang Haohen to help him up. Seeing the gauze wrapped around his chest, he knew it was the work of a girl. He said, "This is from the phoenix bun?" The phoenix cleaned your body, stitched your wounds, applied ointment for you. She also helped you shave and dig out your earwax. "Where's Yi Ro?" Fang Yin asked. When Miss Yi came, the phoenix was cleaning your body, stitching your wounds, applying ointment, shaving your beard and digging out your earwax. She probably felt that she couldn't find anything to do, so she turned around and left. Fang Yen smiled bitterly and said, "Why?" "Why what?" Fang Ying asked in confusion. "What do you know?" Fang Yen shouted angrily. "Everything was done by the phoenix. What did you two idiots do?" Fang Ying and Fang Haohen looked at each other. Fang Haohen said bitterly, "We're too stupid. That's why we can't do anything. We can only sit there and watch over Junior Marshal Uncle. No wonder people say that stupid people have stupid luck. However, some people are really stupid. Some people are just pretending to be stupid." Knock knock knock. Fang Ying went forward and gently knocked on the door. The wooden door of the small courtyard was pulled open. Qin Yin saw Fang Yen, Fang Ying, and Fang Haohen standing at the door. He asked cautiously, "What do you want?" Qin Yin's Huaxia language was still not good. It took a lot of effort to understand what he was saying. Fang Yen waved his hand to tell Qin Yin not to be nervous. He said with a smile, "I'm here to see your master." Qin Yin hesitated. A man's voice came from behind. "Qin Yin, an important guest is here. Invite the guest in." Qin Yin stepped to the side and made an inviting gesture. Chiba Shinobu stood in the courtyard. He was wearing a wide-sleeved robe. His skin was fair. He didn't change much from when they first met. However, Fang Yen could still feel the gloomy and dejected aura from him. He had lost something very important. Domineering. The sword god of Japan, the #1 martial artist in Japan, had lost his domineering aura. This was obviously a very regrettable thing. Fang Yen stood in front of Chiba Shinobu with a trace of pity on his face. Chiba Shinobu laughed. "He's just a loser. Why are you troubled, Fang Yen-san? You didn't lose in swordsmanship. You lost in the way of the world," Fang Yen said. "Japan is still too small. It will limit your vision and mind, which is not good for understanding swordsmanship. This kind of thing can't be changed by one person. It also can't be changed by the power of a country. Japan once had the chance to rise to the sky in one step, but it failed. Failure is inevitable," Fang Yen said with a smile. "You've come to Huaxia. You've stepped on the land of Huaxia. You've seen it with your own eyes and heard it with your own ears. You should know how cohesive and hardworking this nation is. Do you know why we're called the descendants of the dragon? Because our ancestors had such expectations for us. They hoped that all of us would be like dragons. One dragon can turn the world upside down. What kind of power and miracles can 3 billion dragons exert? You'll see it. People all over the world will see it." Chiba gently shook his head and said with a smile, "Fang Yen, don't tell me how big your country is, and don't tell me how outstanding your people are. The East Asians are just as outstanding, and they work just as hard. But I'm still not optimistic about its future. The reason why I'm not optimistic is that Japan lacks young people like you. What they lack is not one, but a group," Chiba Shinobu said with a sad expression. "If we also have a group of young people like you, who are brimming with talent, hot-blooded, fearless of death, and brave to meet any challenge, our future will be better than it is now. Unfortunately, we don't. If the young are rich, the country will be rich. If the young are strong, the country will be strong. This is the most precious asset of a country." Fang Yen smiled and said, "Mr. Chiba, thank you. Thank you for saving me. You have brilliant swordsmanship and the heart of a warrior that matches it." Chiba Shinobu looked at Fang Yen and said, "Fang Yen, promise me one thing." "I can't change my nationality," Fang Yen said with a serious expression. Chapter 281. Chiba Hattori's face and forehead were full of scars. Although they had been treated with medicine, they were not specially bandaged with gauze. Therefore, those wounds were like little red flowers growing in the wild grass, looking particularly delicate and dazzling. Fang Yan's face was also injured, but his face was often injured, so the people around him were used to it. However, when Chiba Hattori's face was injured, everyone felt that it was particularly funny and strange. The head of the Japanese Ministry of War was the Japanese sword god. When he first came to Huaxia, he wore a white, wide-sleeved robe every day like an immortal. At first glance, one could tell that he was a high-quality uncle with knowledge, quality, and wealth. If those love-struck girls saw him, they would definitely yell, "Come to my bowl." However, it didn't take long for him to be beaten up by Fang Yan. It was sad to think of it. Qing Yin refused to leave and stood behind Chiba Hattori. If Fang Yan dared to do anything, he would rush up and be beaten up by Fang Yan. Chiba Hattori also came out, and he looked even more embarrassed. His eyes were still purple-black, and there were several scars on his forehead. One of his arms was tied with a bamboo board. When he walked, he couldn't help but look at his crotch, because Fang Haohan had kicked it there. His mouth was puffed up like a frog that might jump up and eat insects at any time. He stared at Fang Haohan fiercely and hatefully. Obviously, Fang Haohan had replaced Fang Yan's position and become his most hated enemy in his mind. Hearing Fang Yan's refusal, Chiba Hattori looked stunned and said, "Why do you think I would make such a request?" Fang Yan looked at Chiba Hattori and said, "People always tell me that a person will pursue what he lacks. You said that your country lacks talented and hot-blooded young people like me, who are not afraid of death and dare to face any challenge. I'm worried that you will ask me to change my nationality and enter Japan. I know that there are some people who gave up their Huaxia nationality to work for you because they participated in your talent introduction program. However, this group of people will never include me." Fang Yan's memory was still very good. He repeated the words that others had praised him without missing a word. His laughter was clear and bright, like the cry of a crane. He laughed for a while, then looked at Fang Yan and said, "If I put forward such a condition to you, and you happen to be willing to accept it, would you still be the kind of young man I talked about?" "Lord Fang Yan, 99% of the things in this world can be sold and sold, only moral integrity is difficult to value. What kind of moral integrity is it if it can be evaluated? Do you think I have integrity?" Fang Yan couldn't help but laugh. "Yes. I think so too," Fang Yan said. "I just want to ask my international enemy to confirm it for me again. Because my grandfather told me that the person who understands you the most will always be your opponent." "Your grandfather is right," Chiba Hirobumi said. Fang Yan looked at Chiba and said, "When you suddenly jumped, I thought you hadn't given up, so I sent you flying. Later, when I saw the black shadow in your eyes, I realized that you were trying to save me. I'm very curious. If you wanted to kill me so badly, why did you save me at that critical moment?" "I wanted to kill you," Chiba said. "That doesn't mean I wanted to see you killed. Are you saying that I must die by your hands? At least you shouldn't be killed so shamelessly." "You are also a person with integrity," Fang Yan commented. "If it were you, would you have saved me?" Fang Yan looked around, then lowered his voice and said, "I won't hide it in front of you. I wouldn't, because at that time, I was defeated by you, and my heart was filled with hatred. I was thinking about how to stab you and punch you. If someone else did it for me, I wouldn't blame them for not telling me in advance. Besides, I'm afraid of death. What if you don't like me and finish me off with a stab? If someone helped me create an opportunity, I would definitely get up and run down the mountain. Staying alive is more important. You came to challenge me at this age. When I grow to your age, I will challenge you again. As long as you don't die, we will meet again." Fang Yan grinned and said, "Of course, if there were outsiders here, I wouldn't have answered like this. I will express my heartfelt gratitude for your noble character and unquestionable integrity, and I will strongly condemn the actions of those who ambushed you. They ruined a fair and just duel of high quality, and their actions are an insult to us pure warriors. You did what you should have done. If it were me, I would have done the same. Isn't this answer more pleasing?" "It is indeed more pleasing," Chiba nodded. "You live more realistically than I do." "No, I live more shamelessly than you, Fang Yan said. Many people say that about me, but I have never admitted it. However, you are my savior. I am willing to confess in front of you. Because I can't do what you can do. This is where I am not as good as you. So, I am willing to promise you one thing. I hope, wait. Fang Yan quickly interrupted Chiba and said, the request you put forward must be something that I can do, and I am willing to do it. As long as it doesn't violate national policies, laws and regulations, I won't be scolded as despicable, shameless and nasty. I also have a profession as a teacher. Sometimes, I have to maintain my personal image. Chiba was stunned for a long time. Finally, he said, I want to see. Don't underestimate the enemy. Why does he want to see my master? Is it because he was defeated by junior martial uncle that he is not convinced and wants to challenge my master? Fang Yingying asked with a puzzled face. He is courting death. Fang Haohan made an accurate conclusion about Chiba's behavior. Fang Yan's face was gloomy. He said, he is an opponent worthy of respect. Fortunately, there is only one Chiba in Japan. When the three returned to the school, the gate of the small courtyard was wide open. Fang Yingying put on an alert posture and said in a low voice, there are thieves in the house. Slap. Fang Yan slapped his head. Because he was still very weak, the slap was not strong enough, which made people feel a little sorry. Fang Yan strode into the house. There were 3 more people in the house. If the 3 of them were thieves, then they would be 3 beautiful female thieves. Yi Ro, who was in black clothes and pants, stood on the windowsill, looking at the nursery in the yard with clear eyes. She clearly saw Fang Yan, Fang Yingying and Fang Haohan come back, but it seemed that she did not care about their existence at all. She wore a white, high-slit dress covered with black spots and a white blouse. The hem of the blouse was tucked into the long dress, giving her a stylish and capable look. Phoenix, who wore a light pink suit jacket, sat on the sofa in the living room. Lu Chaoga occupied the master's seat and was boiling water to make tea for Phoenix and Yi Ro. Phoenix saw Fang Yan come in, but she was still smiling and talking with Lu Chaoga. She said, you are very skilled in making tea. It seems that you do this kind of thing often? I like to drink tea. Lu Chaoga had a soft smile on her face. It was neither hot nor deliberate. But Fang Yan's understanding of the tea ceremony is far above mine. When we first met, he took out the tea I served to him and made clear comments. Later on, we got to know each other better and I learned even more about the tea ceremony from him. He is a very knowledgeable man. This is very rare in a young man. Phoenix held the teacup in her hands and sipped her tea. She said, Fang Yan does have the habit of showing off his skills. Back in Yanjing, he would often use his strange and unusual knowledge to pick up girls. Of course, he had never succeeded. Because everyone in Yanjing who knows him knows what kind of person he is. By the way, Miss Lu, you seem to be very familiar with this courtyard? You know this room as well as your own home. Do you come here often? This is my courtyard. Lu Chaoga said. When Fang Yan first came, he didn't have a place to live, so I lent him the courtyard. Of course, I planted a lot of flowers and plants and he had to pay me to take care of them. Fortunately, Fang Yan is also very proficient in this area. Under his care, the flowers and plants grew even healthier. Moreover, several pots of plants that were originally showing signs of withering were also brought back to life because of his miraculous hands. Look, those are the spider plants. They are now growing so beautifully. A few days ago, they even bloomed, but now the flowers have withered. Phoenix smiled even more happily and said, 2 days ago, when I was helping Fang Yan wipe his body, I was curious. This kid was beaten up by a wild woman to the point that he didn't dare to go home. He just came to Flower City and now he has such a house to live in. I can't help but be envious. This kid's luck with women is quite good. Lu Chaoga turned her head to look at Fang Yan and said, Fang Yan is indeed a very good person. He has helped me a lot, even my life was saved by him. If I can help him with something, I will be very happy. Heavens, you had such an experience? Phoenix asked in surprise. My life was also saved by him. I don't know if he has told you about it, but we are childhood friends. It is not an exaggeration to say that we are childhood sweethearts. It was a snowy winter and we went ice skating together. I accidentally fell into a hole in the ice, and it was Fang Yen who jumped in first to pull me out. Although people later said that he deliberately used Tai Chi wave to shatter the ice, I don't believe that he would do such a thing. That day, it was raining heavily. Fang Yen and I were eating at Sky No. 1 in Flower City. When we came out, it was already very late and the rain was very heavy. Suddenly, a car rushed over from behind. Fang Yen stood at the side and listened. The two women were not stingy with their words of praise for him. If he had not heard it with his own ears, he would not have known that he was actually so handsome and charming. However, Fang Yen did not feel happy at all. What were these two crazy women trying to do by showing off their affection in such a high-profile manner? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.